and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
There's only maybe one team in this conference that I think that you can almost look at how the Blues could potentially be out goaltended, and that's by the numbers. I think he pushes it into a Game 7. I give Binnington the nod, but Hellebuck's numbers with the structure in front of him has been so doggone good this year.
That was Joey Vitale on with us yesterday talking about the goalie matchup in this series. Alex, to me, it's the biggest storyline heading into this series. Connor Hellebuck is known as one of the best goalies in the NHL, has been for a number of years, will likely win his third Vezina Trophy this year. He is, right now, the best thing going in the regular season. But, and T-Bone, you made this comparison the other day, I think it's apt. He is basically the Clayton Kershaw of the NHL. In the regular season, one of the best to do it. In the postseason, for whatever reason, fair or otherwise, and the same thing was true for Clayton Kershaw. I don't know if it was always fair that he got the criticism that he did, but, hey, man, it is what it is. He does not have the resume in the playoffs that you would expect from your typical all-world, all-everything goalie. Now, some of that may not be entirely fair. A lot of the heavy lifting on his save percentage in the playoffs is related to last year against Colorado where he had a rough series. Outside of that series, though, a career .915 save percentage in the postseason. That's pretty damn good for most goalies. By Connor Hellebuck standards, though, it's below what he typically does during the regular season. Alex, he's going to look on the other side in this series and see the guy that's had him multiple times. This year in the Four Nations face-off, Jordan Binnington got the best of Connor Hellebuck. 6 years ago now in the playoffs, 2019, it was Jordan Binnington that was on the other side of things against the Winnipeg Jets. You look at Hellebuck, though, regular season-wise, dude, he has dominated you if you're the St. Louis Blues. This year, 2-1-0, .920 save percentage, 2 goals against on average. Last year, 2-0-0, .905 save percentage, 2 goals against on average. 2023, 3-1-0 against you. 2022, 2-0-0 against you. A 9-2 record overall over the last 4 seasons, .920 save percentage, 2 goals allowed per game against you. Alex, to me, the story of the series is the 2 best players in the series. It's the 2 guys that are going to be in net.
Yeah, and it's going to be the narrative from start to finish, and you're going to see the narrative change an awful lot depending on what happens in Game 1, Game 2. There's going to be people talking about Hellebuck once again couldn't make the big save when he needed to, or Jordan Binnington looks locked in. Jordan Binnington not making the big save when you need to. All eyes in this series. Every series has a different narrative of what people are focused in on. You know, you go to the Tampa, Florida one, you're going to be talking about the physicality. You go to Toronto and Ottawa, you're going to be talking about, you know, the Brady Tkachuk versus Craig Berube's 5-on-5 play. This one is all about goaltending, and they're right. Like Connor Hellebuck, you know, maybe I'm a little too critical when I call him a choke artist in the playoffs because, you know, in 2021, that was the year I believe that they made it. No, 2021. Yeah, that was the year they made it to the second round, and then they missed the playoffs the next year, and then they get bounced by Vegas, and then they get bounced by Colorado. 4 years ago, he was really good. 3 years ago, he was awesome. That was the bubble season, the shortened year, and he had a .931 save percentage. But the last 2 seasons, and look, last year against Colorado, I don't blame it all on Connor Hellebuck because Colorado was just running a table on them.
Yeah,
like,
defensively, they ran into a buzzsaw.
Defensively, they couldn't stop them. But I do go to that Vegas series and look at it, and I don't think Vegas was this world beater in terms of offense. He had an .886 save percentage.
I mean, they did go on to win the Cup.
Fine.
So.
They were a stingy team, but they weren't Colorado's offense. And look, whether he's got a career .915 save percentage or he's got a career .940 save percentage in the playoffs, he's a goalie that does not make the big save when they need him to. And Jordan Binnington is a guy that has done that. And I agree with Joe. I think in the first 4 or 5 games, Hellebuck's going to have the advantage in this one. The backs are against the wall. Blues are the underdog. The narrative is right there. If this gets into elimination game, I would put my money on Jordan Binnington because there is a lot of tensity and there is a lot of pressure on Connor Hellebuck and the Winnipeg Jets to make the big save when you need to, and he hasn't been able to do that.
I think going into this series, I don't know how much pressure is actually on Connor Hellebuck. Like, I'm talking early in the series. What changes that to me, and this is just my perspective on it, I can't speak for him, I can't speak for any of you guys, but to me, what changes that is once the Blues put the pressure on Connor Hellebuyck. If they get to him in game number 1, and this to me is why I think game 1, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, I think game 1 ultimately might swing this series one way or the other. If the Blues win game 1, I think they win the series. Because I think they will have all of the momentum. All of the pressure will be on Connor Hellebuyck. It will be on Winnipeg. It'll be the Winnipeg media going to the players saying, do you feel like it's happening again? Are you once again going to fall into the same pitfalls that you've had for almost a decade now? Great regular season team, can't seem to get over the hump. Connor Hellebuyck, once again, running into a problem of having a great regular season, and then you get into the playoffs, you go up against that guy on the other side, and you end up being out goaltending by the guy that comes up with the biggest saves when they need it the most. I think that's what changes it. I don't necessarily feel that way going in, though. I think going into this series, it is truly, these teams feel kind of similar. For most people, I think Winnipeg is like the better version of the two. So I'll be picking Winnipeg in the series. And I think game 1 dictates so much about the narrative of the series, how people are talking about the series. And we talked about this yesterday, Alex, the way that the schedule lays out. How does that play into all of this? Well, I mean, that game 1 to 2, there's only 1 day of rest. So there will only be 1 day to really internalize things. Dude, game 2 to 3, though, couple of days of rest, come here to St. Louis. You're going to have all the St. Louis media then talking to Connor Hellebuyck and the Winnipeg Jets. That's where you really start to feel the pressure. If it's 1-1, coming back to St. Louis, and the Blues have stolen home ice advantage in this kind of series.
That's why for me, game 2 is the critical one. And again, we don't have to dive too deep into the weeds with this one, but I think game 2 could really shift the focus here. I agree with you that the pressure is not going to be on Connor Hellebuyck at the start of game number 1. I mean, I don't think there's any pressure on any team at the start of game number 1 because it's the playoffs and you're just feeling it. It's the end of the game, or it's the moment that two goals get past Connor Hellebuyck, because at that point, then the thoughts start creeping into your mind of, man, I can't catch a break right now. Playoffs aren't my thing. What do I need to do? I got to start playing this way. You start shifting the way that you play. The other factor into this, and I don't know how much is into it, but we talked about this yesterday. Go look at the last 2 seasons for Connor Hellebuyck coming into this one. The years that he got bounced in the first round and he didn't have the greatest save percentage. 64 games played, most in the National Hockey League. 60 games played, most in the National Hockey League. He's played 67 games this season, most in the National Hockey League. So, like, why I'm not just going to sit here clear-cut say Connor Hellebuck's the better goalie in this series. Like, look, on paper, he's going to win the Vezina. He should win the MVP, in my opinion, because the dude has been the best player on the ice every single game.
And he might. There's some voting out there that suggests he might end up winning it.
But to me, the narrative about Connor Hellebuyck has been, yeah, he's been a great regular season goalie, but they use him way too much, and by the time the playoffs roll around, dude is going to be gassed. And that's where I would lean a little bit more towards the Blues. They focused in. David Alexander at the beginning of the season told Joey and Curbs, our goal is to make sure that we are not overusing Jordan Binnington. They did at the beginning of the season because Drew Bannister was a little bit into panic mode of, hey, we got to start winning some hockey games.
Turns out his job was on the line,
Yeah,
too.
and it started going back to him. But look at what happened when Jim Montgomery took over. It went strictly to the 2-1 ratio all the way from November up until the end of the season.
Yeah, up until they had that one stretch there where he had like 4 out of 5. But for most of the year, he was pretty strict with that. Alex, you came in today, and you said, I think there is one key to this series that will ultimately dictate who wins. And it's not necessarily that storyline that we just got into. That's the biggest story in this. It may not necessarily be ultimately what wins the series for one side versus the other. For you, what's the key to the series?
3 words, boys. Net front presence. We talked with Joe yesterday about this, and I somewhat disagree with him, and he and I will get into it on pregame tomorrow night, but I actually do think Winnipeg plays bigger than what they look. Like, on paper, they're not the biggest. Morrissey's 6 foot. Neil Pionka's 6 foot. They don't have the biggest guys, but they have Logan Stanley, who's 6'7". They have Luke Shen, who plays like he's 6'7", and their second pairs are a couple of guys that sit around 6'2", 6'3". But it's more than just the defenseman. Adam Lowry is built like a tank. You've got a couple of other guys. Mark Scheifele himself. Kyle Connor's a big dude.
Lowry, one hell of a captain.
One hell of a captain, is so I've been told. Zach Werenski as well.
I'm not going the other direction again.
Great defenseman.
Mistake once.
Yeah, learn from your BKO. But, like, they are going to make you pay in terms of getting in front of the net. They're not going to allow. That's what they were so good at this season. Murat had it in his piece with JR on The Athletic. The emphasis that Scott Arniel took with the Winnipeg Jets this season was we are not allowing teams to get inside of our 5-man unit in the defensive zone. It's why Connor Hellebuck looked so good this season. How do you go about that? Because the last time we saw these two teams play against each other, the Blues weren't willing to do that. Now, maybe it was fatigue. Maybe they were dinged up. Nope, not willing to do that. And Winnipeg's got guys like Connor and Scheifele and Lowry and Iafallo. They will go park themselves in front of the net. Do you get pushed around in front of Jordan Binnington, or do you push them around in front of Hellebuck? Because go back and watch some of the highlights from 2019. You know how they beat Connor Hellebuck? Parked in front of the net and got those deflection goals. That's what's going to come down to.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Blues versus the Winnipeg Jets coming your way tomorrow right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Blues are having morning skate where we are at, which is the Centene Community Ice Center. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios out here. Blues lines today are as expected. Neighbors Thomas Buchnevich is your top line. Thomas out there skating today as he had previously announced. Snuggerud is with Shin and Kairu. Joseph, Sonny, and Bolduc is your third line, the 70s line, and then WTF line is, as expected, your fourth line. Fowler's with Parayko, Broberg, and Falk, and then Suter and Letty. Bennington is in the starters net. The E-Bug is out there at practice today as well, Alex.
Yeah, nobody panic about that. They're carrying him because they're going to give Bennington some time off, obviously, in practice. Don't worry about that. I panicked a little bit when I saw it. I'm like, wait, what's going on right now?
I wish you guys could have seen Alex. Why's the E-Bug traveling with him to Winnipeg?
Understandably so. This literally never happens. They don't travel E-Bugs on the road.
I was like, I don't know, man. They probably want him for an emergency situation. Who knows? Who cares? Yeah, Benner's going to be in the starter's net. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, well, until Nazem Kadri 2.0 runs Bennington, and we're talking Will Cranley in the net.
Don't you put that evil on them. All right, coming up in about 30 minutes, we'll get into Ask Us Anything. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. YouTube chat is off and running today at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. And, of course, we'll be chatting with Brad Thompson. Hopefully this week goes a little better than last week. Coming up at 11:30. Next, we will be talking about those Cardinals. Andre Pallante finding his way as a starter. We've got some interesting numbers on him, and we'll tell you about him next here on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Andre Pallante was not perfect last night. Let's make that very clear. He had a blow-up inning, and this has been an issue for a couple of the Cardinals starters this year. They have one inning where things go right for them, but I will give him credit for this. Andre Pallante stabilized, and in the final 4 innings allowed 1 hit, 0 runs. He ends up giving them 6 innings. It wasn't quite a quality start. 6 innings, 4 earned runs allowed, only the 2 strikeouts, but did not give up any walks. It was a solid start once again by Andre Pallante. And, Alex, this to me is becoming a theme for both he and Matthew Liberatore. Yes, you'd like them to avoid the blow-up inning. That would be ideal. That's what the best starters in Major League Baseball do, right? He's not doing that. He is having a couple of innings where they're getting to him, especially with Libby. He had that early on in the season as well. But what I really like, what we're seeing with them, is they're making adjustments in-game. He saw early on, all right, they're waiting on my heater. The 4-seam fastball early in that game was not a good pitch for them. It was clear that the Mets were waiting on it, and they were crushing it whenever they got the opportunity to do so. He made an adjustment. He went to more of the breaking balls, and he ended up having good results because of it. I thought after that second inning, oh, man, you might be looking at like a 4-inning appearance for Andre Pallante, and that is worst-case scenario for the Cardinals because they are in this long stretch of 13 games in 13 days. They're using the 6-man rotation. This could start to snowball on them if Pallante goes short. You've got Michaelis on the mounds today. You don't know really what to expect out of him any given start. You go into that start on Saturday, you could be really light in the bullpen, and you already just brought up Matt Swanson. There's not really a whole lot of flexibility to go make a move there. So it was huge for them to get 6 innings out of Pallante. You lose the game 4-1. It wasn't their best game of the season by any stretch, but I was really impressed by the amount of adjustments that he was able to make in-game.
Yeah, I agree with you, and not to steal T-Bone's thunder, but he and I had the same thought process. It's like it's just one of these blow-up innings that seem to hurt him, but here's the part that really stands out to me. The players know the situation they're in with the 6-man rotation, right? Like they know we have to go deep. Even Ollie had said that. Look, we've got to start getting our starters to go deep so that we're not overusing our bullpen. Look at the Steven Matt start against Houston. Now, it wasn't a blow-up inning, but he gave up 1 run in the first, and what did he do? To BK's point, he made adjustments, and he gave them 71 pitches and got through 5 for them. Andre Pallante knows the task at hand of, look, I got to go deep in this game, so he has the 4 runs given up in the second inning, and then he gives them 93 pitches and gets them through 6. Like, that's one benefit of the 6-man rotation, if you're Ollie and this coaching staff, is looking at it and being like, look, our pitchers understand the assignment, right? We heard the Eric Fetty quote the other day talking about how it's just trying to one-up each other. Give the Cardinals pitching staff credit. Even if it is one blow-up inning, the offense is to a position now where it's like you give up 3 in 1 inning, we could come back from that. But to take that and then say, cool, no more runs, and I'm going to give you the length that I desperately need, that's a positive, especially when you've got younger guys on the mound like Pallante and Liberatore.
I know we're going to get the text, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, because we always tend to get this whenever I bring up, like, lowering the bar for anything about the Cardinals, whether that's not expecting them to win 95 games every year or not expecting a specific player to give you a sub-3 ERA or an 800-plus OPS. I think for right now, with where the Cardinals are at offensively, and yesterday this obviously didn't go their way, but if you can get 6 innings out of your starter, give up 4 earned runs or fewer, you've got a chance. That's really what you're asking for from your starters right now. And that's not asking a lot, because you do have a pretty good back end of the bullpen. I think they have allowed for us to have confidence in at least 3 of them. I think you have really high level of confidence right now in Ryan Helsley, Phil Maton, and yes, I'm going to include Kyle Leahy. I think those 3 guys you feel pretty good about. So if you get the 6 innings, you feel like you can turn it over to the back end of your pen, you have a really good chance to be able to close that thing out. The Cardinals' offense on a regular basis, yesterday notwithstanding, is giving you 4+ runs. So you get that out of your starters, man. I think you're in a good spot. Pallante's giving them that with regularity right now. That length that they're getting out of their starters has been very impressive to me.
Yeah, and that is the most important part for them right now, especially in that six-man rotation, because it can all really snowball for you and very quickly now that you are down an arm in your bullpen. And I like what you're seeing from the two young starters in the rotation, right? Andre Pallante, Matthew Liberatore are giving the Cardinals a chance every time they take the mound right now. And I know, yes, they didn't end up scoring enough runs yesterday to win that baseball game. Griffin Canning was awesome. That was one of those where you kind of tip the cap and say, no, he got the best of us today. But I'm not worried about the offense as a whole. If the pitching can continue to do this, where they are able to do what you said, 6 innings, 4 earned runs, if you can get that continuously from the rotation and then the bullpen kind of middle innings kind of pieces itself together, which I think they're doing a little bit better of a job of right now, and Svenson's stuff looked amazing last night.
It was good.
This team will be able to be in the playoff hunt. They will be a team that will be able to finish above 500. They will be able to finish this road trip 4-3, which is a very tough road trip for them, for a team that right now has just one win on the road. The road has not been their friend so far this season, but a big reason for that, why? Because their pitching didn't give them a chance. If they can get this kind of performance from the rotation, they are going to be just fine.
I've been very impressed with Pallante for a while now. You guys know, T-Bone, we talked about him during the offseason, and I'm higher on him than you are because of the stuff. He does not have strikeout stuff. It's just not something you can expect out of him. But since the 4th of July last year, Andre Pallante has made 18 starts. He has gone 105 innings in those 18 starts, and he has a 3.4 ERA. I made the comparison previously. Now, they're a little different. One was a lefty starter. The other guy is technically right-handed, even though he has the reverse splits going for him. I think Pallante reminds me a little bit of Jaime Garcia. The way that he goes about it, hopefully with fewer injury questions and stuff.
Less tummy aches.
Yeah, less tummy aches than Jaime Garcia had. But the effectiveness without that strikeout stuff is similar in a lot of ways to what Jaime Garcia brought to the table. I looked this up earlier today. Since the 4th of July last year, here's a quick list of starters that have a worse ERA than Andre Pallante, again, with a 3.4. Justin Steele, Luis Castillo, Logan Webb, your boy George Kirby, Brian Bayo, Jose Barrios, Tanner Bybee, Nathan Eovaldi, Yusei Kikuchi, T-Bone, Mackenzie Gore, Aaron Nola, Zach Gallen, Brandon Pfaadt, Merrill Kelly, in other words, the Diamondbacks rotation, and Mitch Keller. Those guys all have a worse ERA since the 4th of July of last year than Andre Pallante. And that's the backdrop to what I want to read from Eno Sayers, who wrote a piece earlier today on the pitchers in Major League Baseball that might be experiencing some kind of a breakout season this year. Pallante was one of the pitchers that he highlighted, and he said it this way, quote, "Think of it this way. Here are all the pitchers with a ground ball rate of 60% or higher in at least 130 innings over the last 2 years. Pallante, Jose Soriano, and Framber Valdez. It's boring. He won't maintain the kind of production that he's had so far this year, but could he have a high 3s ERA with a high whip and fewer strikeouts than your average pitcher? Sure. He could still be useful at the right times in the right league. That's definitely something he's capable of." That's kind of how I view Pallante. He's a really solid, 3 or 4 starter for you. That's how Pallante should be seen, and if you can get this out of him consistently and he can continue to make the adjustments that are necessary, Cardinals developed one heck of a starting pitcher, man.
Yeah, I agree with that. And look, though I was viewed as the lower one on Pallante, I think you can have guys like this profile in a rotation. I just think you can't ask them to be more than a number 3 and maybe a number 4. That is the perfect profile for them. These are the type of guys that are perfect 3-4s. There's the exception to the guys like Framber Valdez who are able to keep it on the ground like that, but he's got better swing and miss stuff. I think Pallante's in his perfect role right now. The problem for the Cardinals, they just don't have that perfect number 2. They've got Fedde and Pallante who are great 3-4s for any rotation. They're missing that second guy to be the Robin with Sonny Gray. But if you can develop that, now you don't have to go out and spend the $11 million for Steven Matz this upcoming free agency when you say, boy, man, maybe we need the number 4. No, you don't. You got that internally, and he's making $2 million. Boy, that gives you $10 million to throw around wherever else problems might be occurring for your baseball club.
Think of the way it sets up if these guys develop in the minors, too, that you're hoping for. If Quinn Matthews' ceiling is a legit number 2, and we're talking Pallante being a 3-4, I'd throw McGreevy into that conversation as 100%. Well. And then you got a Matthew Liberatore who could be a 4-5. There you go. 2 through 5 is set, and they're all cost-controlled pitchers. And guess what you can do with that? You can go throw $20 million at a starting pitcher that's an ace for you if need be. That's the ideal scenario. And that's honestly what Chaim Bloom should be drooling at the mouth over. Like, hey, we've got this now.
100%.
Now I can actually do a job of a general manager, a president of baseball operations, and say, this is the area that we need to go out there and spend money on.
We got this from the text line. Is Pallante's career shaping up to what we thought that Dakota Hudson's would have been? Yeah. I think that's a really fair comparison as well. They go about it a little bit differently, but in terms of the overall results, innings eater, ground ball guy that ends up maybe like having a higher walks hits per innings pitch than you'd expect, and you're always kind of walking that tightrope in their individual starts. I think that's exactly what I would expect Andre Pallante to be long term.
Dakota Hudson was an ace, but they ruined him. He couldn't get there.
The good old days when we said some wild
injuries and walks, that'll do it for you. Coming up in 15 minutes, ask us anything. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Sports or otherwise, we'll get to ask us anything in 15 minutes. Brad Thompson, Cardinals analyst, joins us next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to tell you about my friends out at Rhino Shield that can change the outlook of your home. The exterior, if it looks washed, if it looks worn down, if the water stains are starting to show up, if the paint's chipping off, or maybe you just moved into it and you're like, I just don't like the color of it. That's where Rhino Shield can come into play. And maybe you'll be like me at the start where you're like, look, I'll just save a couple of thousands of dollars and I'll just paint it myself. Sure, that paint's going to add up over time because you'll be painting it the next year and the year after and the year after. That's what Darren explained to me over at Rhino Shield. And what he said is what they use at Rhino Shield isn't paint. It's ceramic coating that is going to stick 8 to 10 times thicker than the paint that you're actually going to use if you buy it over the counter at a hardware store. Plus, with Rhino Shield's work, it's engineered to outlast paint. It's 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays, which, by the way, it's going to save you some money on energy bills. It's going to resist chipping, cracking, and fading, all of that taken care of at Rhino Shield, and it's backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. I did this with Rhino Shield back in 2020. My house looks brand new today like it did when Darren's team did the work. So check them out today. Schedule your estimate online, 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. It's a busy time in St. Louis sports as all four teams are in action this weekend. First of all, the Cardinals lost to the Mets yesterday by a score of 4-1. They're continuing that four-game series tonight with first pitch at 6:10. Tomorrow, the Blues are kicking off the playoffs. Game 1 in Winnipeg, pregame at 4 o'clock and puck drop at 5 right here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN. The Battlehawks are also in Arlington taking on the Renegades tomorrow at 11:30, and St. Louis City will be hosting Vancouver Whitecaps FC tomorrow at 7:30. I'm Jordan Deacon. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
1 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. We're hanging with Brad Thompson on 101 ESPN.
Hanging breaking ball from Brad Thompson, and boy, does he get a swing on it. Lift and separate, and see you later.
Hanging with BT is sponsored by St. Luke's, ranked top 2% in the nation for cardiac surgery by Health Grades. Visit stlukes-stl.com.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center, where the Blues are on the ice for morning skate. If you want to check out a quick video, get yourself excited for the playoffs. We've got that on all of our social media platforms. Jordan Binnington was out there. All the guys were out
Cam
there.
Fowler almost ran through the boards to hit BK.
That was pretty cool. Dylan Holloway, I did not see on the
screen?
ice, Alex. I know this is the question that we typically get a lot. There's no expectation that Dylan Holloway's playing.
No,
right?
no, guys,
Okay,
this
cool.
isn't the Tommy Trumpets going off and the dude just walks out on the ice in Game 1 in Winnipeg. He's not skating with the team. I would say plan on him not being available in this series.
Remember 2022 when the question was like, hey, is Torrey Krug going to play? And then he took the ice before the game. It's like, oh, my God, Torrey Krug's back. And that was the whole.
Yeah, and they said he was going to play Game 7 if they got there, and they lost with like 2 seconds left on the clock to
That was a
Colorado.
bummer.
Why do I not remember that at all?
That was the Colorado series, remember, where we were there on morning skate. He came out and he was skating with the team, and then they lost with, what was it, like 5
He
seconds
took the pregame
left?
skate with them for Game 6 as well, and they said, well,
Yeah.
for Game 7, if we're there, he'll potentially
He said
be able to
afterwards,
play.
he's like, I was ready to go for Game 7, and then the Blues coughed up that goal with 5 seconds left. Ville Husso was in that for that one, T-Bone.
It was quite the bummer. But what is not a bummer is that we've got Brad
Wasn't.
Thompson on the line via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Cardinals analyst for Fanduel Sports Midwest. You can, of course, see him over there. He's on the call for the Cardinals versus the Mets series out in New York. BT, we're hoping that things go a little smoother this week, my friend. How you doing, man?
I thought it worked out perfectly last week. I enjoyed hearing the echo. There was a lot of great response. What's going on? Tell us how we doing.
That's just because, BT, you got off the air faster with us. You didn't have to talk to us before we got into the nitty-gritty of it all.
Well, I can always make some sort of a malfunction happen if we get too deep.
True. Very true.
All right, BT,
Tunnel.
let's get into this. Andre Pallante, I thought, a really interesting game yesterday. So he goes out there for the second inning, has a bunch of contact against him, and ends up giving up that 4 spot. But he makes the adjustment and then gives you 6 innings overall in that game, which is huge right now, given the fact that they're in the 6-man rotation. What'd you see from Pallante? How was he able to make that adjustment in game?
Yeah, to me, that's the biggest part, right? Getting to the big leagues is very hard, and we know the few that get to the big leagues, it's a special thing. Staying in the big leagues is even harder, and making adjustments is how you stay. And to me, that is so impressive, and it's him being able to do it. It is Pajes behind the plate working with him, and it's Dusty Blake, right? Everybody's coming together, has a plan of attack when you do it. But he started mixing up his pitches more. He had some misses up in the zone. I know Pajes talked about it after the game, just telling him, hey, throw these with conviction. You got this. He started to lean on his slider more, a pitch that 2 starts ago against the Phillies was really, really good for him. Starting in that 3rd inning, he started using it more, and it got people off of his fastball a little bit, and then rolled after that. He retired 12 of 13 after that adjustment. So To me, that's the biggest thing for a young pitcher is to be able to make those adjustments. And I know that Andre Pallante talked about it. He said, man, I wish I'd have been able to make those adjustments pitch to pitch instead of inning to inning. But that's kind of the progression. Some guys make adjustments year to year. You just go through a year and you just battle. Sometimes it's start to start. Other times it's inning to inning, which we ended up seeing him make good adjustments. And the hope is for him next time out, it's pitch to pitch. If you see that a team is on something, or if your catcher sees that, or your pitching coach and comes out and talks to you about it, just being able to make those changes. But I'm with you, man. I was impressed. At the end of the day, I know the Cardinals didn't win. Offense was hard to come by. Griffin Canning was a lot better than I was expecting in that ball game. But I thought that Pallante did his job and yet again gave you a chance.
BT, for the pitching as a whole, are those adjustments what's impressed you the most? Because I think it's fair to say that there was a lot of skepticism of this pitching staff when the season began. And, I mean, you're talking about a rotation that has been really consistent with the exception of that Boston Red Sox series.
Yeah, and that is the one. Like even Miles Michaelis, right? He's the outlier. He's starting tonight, and he's got a 9 ERA. He's given you a chance to win in 2 of his 3 starts. He just got his doors blown off in Boston, where he gives up 8 in 2 2/3. Like you're going to have those every once in a while. But to me, yeah, that has been impressive. And the way that these guys are utilizing their arsenal, like really, there's not a guy in this rotation that has crazy swing and miss and just a quote unquote stuff guy. I think the closest that you have to that is maybe Libby, and Libby's really not necessarily that either. He's got a pitch too. So I think best utilizing your arsenal, really digging in on not falling into sequences, and that's going to be one of the biggest things I'm going to be watching tonight for Miles Michaelis, is each time around, how does he attack the batter the second time and hopefully the third time, because it's going to have to be different. He's not a stuff guy. He doesn't have that one pitch that you say, all right, well, that's it. If Miles Michaelis has his slider going, he's good. Like, no, he's got to use everything. But I think that Dusty Blake and the entire staff, I think they've done a really good job of just game planning for their guys. And game plans are only as good as execution. The execution here, especially in the last 10 games for your starting staff, has been really good. So I hope to continue to see that. We'll see, what it looks like at the end of the year. I think that we all expect some sort of moves to happen throughout the season. You're not going to do a 6-man rotation for that long either, so there's going to be some changes there. But I've been very encouraged with what this group has been able to do.
Brad Thompson's our guest here on 101 ESPN. Of course, you can watch him on Fanduel Sports Midwest. He joins us each and every Friday on BK and Ferrario. BT, I did want to ask you, I don't think we've talked yet this year about Jordan Walker and what we've seen from him. If you watch him in the outfield, it looks like a completely different player. He looks more confident. The results speak for themselves. He's ended a couple of games with really impressive catches in right field. He just looks like a better player. At the plate, though, he looks more assured. Like, he looks more comfortable, but the results are still kind of similar to what they've been in years past. How have you analyzed the first few weeks of Jordan Walker's season, BT?
Yeah, well, let's start with the outfield part, because I couldn't agree more. He is finally comfortable and confident, out in the outfield, which you're going to get that more and more due to reps. The more you're out there, the better you feel. But the idea of just giving him runway and just saying, hey, you're our guy. You're going to be out there. You're going to be playing right field. You're going to get 600-plus plate appearances. I think that freed him up a lot. But then he went to work. And I can't say enough about the hiring of John Jay and what he has meant to this team, and specifically to the outfielders. They are out there working every single day before the gates are open, before people are there. See your outfielders coming in just drenched in sweat beforehand because JJ's got them running. It's meaningful reps. It's not just like hey, go out there and take a few balls off the bat. It's like, we are going to work our tails off, and you're going to get better and better. And they know, all these outfielders know, that John Jay and the rest of the staff, they're evaluating every little thing, not just balls hit to them, anything that's hit. Where's your first step? Well, are you on point, or are you a little bit late? And then they go over and they fix these things. So that has been a huge boost. And defensively, you're right. Jordan Walker specifically, he's trusting his instincts. He's going after the baseball, and he just looks comfortable and confident, which is huge. Offensively, we saw a hot start from him. I think that here recently we're seeing him fall back into some of the trends that he had maybe a year ago, where he's pulling off the baseball just a little bit. But his takes overall have been better, and you guys know when somebody looks jumpy in the box. You guys know when it's like all he can do to stop himself from flailing at a breaking ball off the plate. And I think that his pitch recognition has been better. him learning about how pitchers are attacking him has been a lot better. I think he's still going to be a guy. He's got half of his field, I believe. At least this was the case going into yesterday. Half of his hits are the other way. So he is using the whole field. He's not necessarily using the whole field with authority yet. It's not like he's hitting missiles to right field, but he is letting the ball travel and take some of his hits that direction. I think that he's always going to be a pull-side power guy just with his swing. But if he can continue to recognize pitches and lay off of what the opposition is going to try to do to him, which is away, breaking balls way off, sinkers in off the plate to set him back up away. If he can start not falling into any of these patterns, I think he's going to be great. Again, he's 22 years old. Like, it's so young. He's got so much power potential. And I feel like we've been hearing about Jordan for so long, ever since getting drafted in the first round, that we forget that he has had very limited reps at this level. So he's growing. And I think that we're seeing that maturation process, and I think that we're going to see it throughout the entire season.
BT, another guy that we talked a lot about yesterday, and look, you've been around baseball for a long time, so you know when guys can take control of a locker room, a clubhouse, and really becomes a leader on a team. Has Brendan Donovan stepped into that role this season, not just with his bat and where he's hitting in the lineup in the 3-hole, but just away from the field as a leader?
Yeah, I think that he's just one of those guys that you gravitate towards. And it's not like he's standing on top of the table after every game and yelling at the boys. That's just not the way that he goes about it. But he goes about it just by his work. And he's very intentional with everything that he does, whether it's he's working out or he's taking ground balls or he's just having a conversation, whether it be with a member of the media, a fan, or one of his teammates. And I think that intention that he has in everything that he does, like, it makes you want to do what he's doing. Obviously, the results are there. He's riding a 13-game hitting streak. Wherever you put him defensively, he's been great. I mean, he's been filling in. Him and Sajasi have been splitting some time over at shortstop while Mason Wynn is getting that back ready, and he's been great. So, yes, he has absolutely taken one of those leadership roles, and I think it's just one where sometimes somebody tries to, like, play the leader, where it's just like, okay, well, I guess it's my turn. I'm a young guy, but I better just jump in. It just comes natural to him. He's a military family, grew up in structure with the respect, and I just feel like he emulates that when he walks into the room.
All right, BT, we'll get you out of here on this. Brad Thompson is our guest here on 101 ESPN. You can hear him each and every Friday here on BK and Ferrario throughout the Cardinals season. Thomas Sajasi, you mentioned him splitting a little bit of the time with Brendan Donovan right now while Mason Wynn is on the injured list. Wynn is making his way back. Sounds like a rehab stint is coming very shortly for him, potentially I think as soon as today. Sajasi maybe gets an opportunity tonight, I would assume, against a lefty on the mound. What do you view as his role for the Cardinals, even after Mason Wynn returns, if there is one? He's been really good in his limited opportunities thus far, BT.
Yeah, you look what he's done in the last week. He's like 5 for 11. Another guy, wherever you put him, he's going to make the plays for you. He just hits. He's rocking the batting gloves right now, too. We asked him, Chip and I were on the plane, and we asked him, like, dude, what's up with the gloves? He goes, it's working. You know, he's been a no batting glove guy, but also a superstitious guy, like most athletes are. But look, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like. I just know this. He's a valuable piece to have on a ball club, somebody that can be a versatile infielder, that takes really good at-bats. He has some sneaky pop. He's got some doubles, got some homers. Everybody remembers the big shot that he hit out of Fenway a couple of weeks ago. I just feel like he's a nice piece to have. So whether you have somebody hurt he needs to fill in or a piece off the bench, I feel like he has made himself a very valuable commodity. And I'm excited for him, too. Again, another really young player, a piece of that Jordan Montgomery trade that came over from the Rangers, and starting to see, the value that he has at this level. But the dude has been awesome, and I agree with you. I would expect him to be in there tonight against the lefty, David Peterson, and he's probably going to end up with 2-3 knocks because that's just what he does.
I also love the way that Ollie's been utilizing him and Baker as the right-handed bats off of the bench potentially late in these games. Kind of allows you to platoon some of those spots, middle infield / DH. It's been a lot of fun to watch Ollie navigate things that way as well. Hey, BT, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. Enjoy yourself out there in New York. We'll talk with you again next week.
Hey, you guys have a great rest of your show. Happy Easter to you guys, all the listeners out there. Hope you guys enjoy your families and have a great weekend.
Absolutely.
Happy
Same to you.
Easter.
As Brad Thompson joining us here on BK and Ferrario, he'll be joining us each and every Friday. Hopefully it always sounds as good as it did today.
Crisp.
Last week was a little bit of a one-off. We hope.
We'll be here till June, too, at Centene, because while the Blues are in the playoffs, we're still at Centene live. So we'll have a lot of crisp interviews with
I
BT.
like the way you think till June.
That's right.
Till
It'll be
June,
great.
middle of June.
Parade down Market
Honestly,
Street.
it'll probably be July 4th because that's how the NHL is going to schedule this bad boy out.
It'll be great. As many off days as humanly possible.
Let's just put 3 off days in between of series. That makes sense.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Earlier today, Robert Thomas was on with the morning show, and they asked him, what do you think of the schedule, the way that it lays out? Do you think that'll have an advantage for one side or the other? He's like, honestly, I've never been a part of anything like this, so I have no idea.
Yeah, because that 2019, go back and look at it. Every other day, it was game.
Yeah. He's like, I don't know. I think there was one time, like during COVID, maybe, where we had a couple
let's
of
go
days
back
off,
to that
but,
schedule.
Other than that, I'm really not sure.
Just can't you call Brooks and Dunn and be like, look, guys, why don't you take that red dirt road back to Saturday at Enterprise Center?
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Coming up next, it's Ask Us Anything, sports or otherwise, here on BK and Ferrario.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the ENB Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. ENB Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Ask Us Anything. If you guys have any questions, sports or otherwise, go ahead and get them in right now on the Air Comfort Service text line. Let's start out with this from the 314. Guys, to me, the Jets haven't gone through much adversity this season. The Blues did nothing but go through adversity all year. Do you think that will have an impact on this series?
It always has an impact on the series. Like, teams that know how to handle adversity, teams like, look, Winnipeg, I don't know how many times Winnipeg was going into this third period trailing, but, you know, that's at least plays into this a little bit. How many times did you exit the first period where you were trailing, and how many times did the Blues come back from games? It impacts it, but, man, playoffs are just a different beast. And there are guys on Winnipeg's team that have been around for some time. Scheifele, Lowry, Morrissey, Connor Hellebuck, Nikolai Ehlers, Kyle Connor. Like, these guys have been around a long time. So, yes, adversity plays a piece into the playoff series, but more than anything, it's who steps their game up to the playoff level first.
I've got those numbers for you, Alex, on the comebacks during the season. Yeah. Winning when after trailing after one. The Winnipeg Jets had 18 wins this year when trailing after the first period. Blues had 12. Winnipeg had 5 wins this year when trailing after 2. Blues had 3.
Yeah.
So that's where you're at on those respective.
What I meant to, and I mean, there's the numbers for you. So, like, they've been in those scenarios a lot. But I mean, Winnipeg was the best team in the NHL for a reason. They don't trail a lot, and that's where it's like, hey, what do they look like when they get down? What do they look like when they go down by 2 goals in the first period if the Blues can do that?
Yep. I do think it's something that plays into this. I think a lot of it is, I mean, you're a product of your own experiences. The Blues' experiences this year were injuries. Mm-hmm. A bunch of losses piling up, their coach getting fired, having to play like 25 games in 35 days. I mean, they are battle-tested for this. They may still end up losing this series. I personally have picked them to lose this series, but it won't be because of a lack of mettle. Like, they're not going to have... They're not going to wilt based on the adversity. They just might not be as good as the Winnipeg Jets, and that's okay.
That's why I really think those 2 days off are going to be massive. Joey said it earlier today on TMA, which I agree with. You know, the Blues, when we saw them go on that 12-game win streak, there were very few days off in between. They're a team of routine. What happens when you sit around for 2 days, then play one, then you sit around for another 2 days? It can impact the team. Which one lets that impact them negatively is going to be a difference in the series.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, do any of your children hate being on the changing table? My 16-month-old is currently in that phase. Any suggestions? Oh, yeah.
Ours, I mean, after about like 9 months, we stopped doing the changing table and we changed them on the floor.
Yeah, Luca, we tried with the changing table. We continue to try with the changing table. Luca has decided that he is insane, and there are times where that's just not a possibility. The thing that we've done, and this is for a lot of different things that he doesn't want to do, I would assume you've probably done something similar, Alex. We make it his choice. And what I mean by that is, would you want mommy or daddy to go change your diaper? It's not a would you like to change your diaper decision. Yeah. It's who would you like to do this for you? It's happening, and you get to decide who you want to go change it on the changing table. Same thing is true whenever he goes to bed. Do you want to rock with us, or do you want to go to your crib? Do you want to walk to your crib, or do you want us to carry you to your crib? Those are some of the ways that we go about it, because right around 16 months old for Luca, he decided he gets to make all of the decisions. Yeah. So that's how we make it his choice without actually making it his
we
choice.
Always try and make it fun, too. Like the other day, the girls did not want to come inside when we were outside playing, because I was like, okay, Daddy's got to go start doing dinner. Sure. I said, let's go inside. And they're like, no. And I looked at them and I said, let's see who can run inside faster.
There you
go. I said, who's going to get inside first? And then both of them like perked up. They're like, ooh. And then, of course, they both ran. One pushed the other. They fell down, started screaming again. But I'm like, well, we had fun for about 10 seconds there.
Well, you had fun for half a second,
yeah.
then another problem was created.
I mean, I laughed for a couple of seconds after, and then I was like, you guys are good.
And you got a good story out of it.
Yeah, great story out of it. But for the changing table, I just stopped trying on the changing table. I'm like, all right, cool, we'll lay on the floor. And then there's less places for you to roll off of and, just sit there in between my legs while we change you.
All right, from the 618, how long does it take for you guys to prep your show? Depends what you're talking about there. The actual prep that the three of us do in person, typically about an hour. We, a lot of the time, start preparing somewhere between like 10 and 10:15, and then we'll have the rundown ready to go set for us by the time that we come on the air. As for like the actual preparation that we all do individually, it's different.
24 hours.
Yeah, it's different depending on what the day is, what's going on, but I mean, that includes watching the games, reading everything we can, listening to whatever was out there. Alex does a really great job with a lot of the hockey stuff. Like, he listens to more hockey stuff than me or T-Bone do. T-Bone does an awesome job listening to a lot of the baseball podcasts. I try to do that for myself as well, but we all bring different stuff to the table and then ultimately put it all together, and it becomes a collaborative effort. But it's an hour right before the show, but beyond that, it's hours upon hours of just always being up on things.
We're like PBs and Js, Like, you can't make a PB&J without one of the three elements, PB&J without bread, what is it? It's just peanut butter and jelly, and it's a mess on your countertop. You can't make it without peanut butter. It's just a jelly sandwich.
I'd like to think I'm the bread, then. That sounds like the most important ingredient.
Fair enough. From the 314, Alex,
You're
you
the
think there's a
butter 'cause you're
Canadian
nuts.
team?
That was pretty good. Air
buddy.
5 that one.
Thanks, buddy.
Alex, is there a Canadian team that you could see legitimately hoisting the cup this year?
Toronto, mostly because of Craig Berube. I do think people were complaining about Craig Berube this year because it's like, wow, the offensive numbers have dipped down. Yeah, your offensive numbers have been awesome the last few years, and you've sucked in the playoffs. They would be one. I've got money on the Ottawa Senators, mostly because I was like, well, great odds, and I put it on in the middle of the season. There's a lot of people that like Montreal right now. There's a lot of people that like Montreal because of the talent they've added. But if I had to go with one, mine would be Toronto.
I think Toronto has a chance. I would not be picking them, though. If I was picking anybody to win the Cup this year from Canada, I think it would probably be Winnipeg, just because I think the Eastern Conference, to me, is just a gauntlet this year. The West is really good, but I think Winnipeg could get out of it if they get healthy by the second round. That is the disclaimer here. They've got to be healthy for that second round series. I think they might be able to get through the Blues without all of their dudes. I don't think they can get past one of Colorado or Dallas without all of their dudes.
That's the tough part with some of those Canadian teams, because I love the Oilers when they're healthy. Well, they're banged up.
Yeah, I think
Same with
Oilers are
Winnipeg.
losing in the first round.
I think they are too now because they're not healthy. If they had all their guys and they were at 100% health, I would take them potentially be this team. I would probably go Toronto. They're probably the healthiest of all the higher Canadian seeds.
By the way, Alex, what was the update that you had earlier today on the Winnipeg Jets?
There's no Ehlers. There was no Velarde at practice, which Ehlers was expected. Velarde, I mean, he's not skating with them, which again tells you like it's going to be multiple games because he hasn't even done contact yet.
That's really interesting.
And then the other one was Rasmus Kupari, who was a fourth liner for them.
Okay. So 3 of their forwards,
yeah.
3 of their 12 forwards are potentially out for game 1.
So what this does, and we'll talk about this with Ken Wiebe a little bit later, who covers the team, but Connor Scheifele, Iafallo, that's still going to be a really good line. Niederreiter, Nemesnikov, and Perfetti, that lost the offense, and Tanev, Lowry, and Appleton is their bottom 2 lines stay the same. Their top 2 lines, you're adding a third liner to a top line, and you're putting Niederreiter and Perfetti up there with no Nikolai Ehlers. So, I mean, you don't have the offense in the top 6 like they would with those 2 players.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone on BK. By the way, Jordan Deacon doing a fantastic job for us back in the studio today as we're broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center, where the Blues took the ice earlier today for morning skate. Robert Thomas was indeed on the ice for that as expected, and this is his opportunity to become more than just a local celebrity. He could be a legit national spotlight player depending on what happens for the Blues in this series. We'll discuss what lies ahead for him and the opportunity that exists for him coming up next here on BK and Ferrario.
and Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
It's time for a Blues playoff report presented by English Sweep Fireplace and Chimney Restoration. Schedule your chimney inspection at EnglishSweep.com.
With Alex and T1 on BK, Robert Thomas is second in the NHL in points since February 1st. The only guy with more points than Robert Thomas is somebody that's going to be in the MVP conversation this year, might even win it, in Nikita Kucherov. Beyond that, it's David Pastrnak and Robert Thomas. They have 45 points each since February 1st. Robert Thomas has done that, Alex, in 30 games. 45 points in 30 games. That is a more than 100-point pace for the entire season if you pace that thing out. He's a plus 19 in that stretch, been one of the best players in the NHL since February 1st, and yet doesn't get a ton of national spotlight. For understandable reasons, man. He's not been this player for the entirety of his career. But if he does this in the playoffs, if he goes up against the team that won the President's Trophy this year, that has Mark Scheifele and has Kyle Connor as two of the top goal producers in the league at their respective positions this year, and if that line is able to slow them down, if not shut them down, and Thomas continues on this kind of a torrid points production pace, dude, he's going to be more than just a local name. He's going to turn himself overnight, really over the course of the next 2 weeks or so potentially, into one of the top centers in the league. This is when that kind of a conversation really begins.
Yeah, it does. And I'm going to bring two guys to the forefront here to where they were good players, but they were probably underrated players. And then they went to the postseason and had success, and then everybody in the National Hockey League was talking about them. Anze Kopitar and Ryan Getzlaf. Let's start with Kopitar, because he entered the league at 19 years old, and if I'm not mistaken, he was an 11th overall draft pick. So the stock was there. His first 4 seasons in the NHL, 61 points, 71 points, 66 points, 81 points. Pretty good, right? But he was a minus 12, minus 15, minus 17, 6, and they missed the playoffs every single year. So there's conversation about Kopitar, but it's like, okay. At the time, too, Datsuk is dominating the National Hockey League. You know, you've got the guys who are established stars in the NHL. And then in 2011, 2012, the year that they won the Stanley Cup, he was 24 years old. In 20 games for them, he put up 8 goals, 20 points. It was a plus 16. That was the moment that he earned Selke Trophy nominations for the following rest of his career. It was the year that he consistently was a 70-point player, and it was the year that L.A. just remained in the playoff conversation. That's when Anze Kopitar went from maybe an underrated centerman who keep an eye on to this dude's a star in the National Hockey League. Ryan Getzlaf, another great example. Now, he hit stardom faster, but he entered the league when the Anaheim Ducks were already pretty competitive in the playoffs because he was 21 when that team won the Stanley Cup. But his first year, 39 points in 57 games. The next year, 58 points. But that year in the postseason, 21 games, he had 17 points. Like, to me, you're never going to be considered a star because of the regular season unless you're putting up 90 and 100 points consistently. You don't become a star in the National Hockey League until you perform on the big stage. And it doesn't even have to be points for Robert Thomas. If you come out of this series and the Blues win in 7 and Mark Scheifele's got 3 points and Kyle Connor's got 2 goals, and it's because Robert Thomas' line has been matched up against them, this is when people go from, hey, Robert Thomas, maybe an underrated player in the National Hockey League, to Robert Thomas, one of the best centermen in the National Hockey League. So, to me, this is the moment. He's never had a playoffs where he's been the guy. The most he had was that 21-22 season, and we talked about this a couple of days ago. This was that fringe where you started to see the changing of the guard to where Ryan O'Reilly would be out there, but then maybe a penalty kill face-off. You saw Robert Thomas come out. And then they missed the playoffs for 2 straight years. This is it. This is the moment where Robert Thomas is going to be eating 20-plus minutes a night. He's going to be going up against the best lines that he possibly can. And do you outperform them? Because if the best player takes his game to the next level in the playoffs, it's when everybody's talking about you.
I would put 2 other names into that criteria, and it is more like defense-minded, defense-oriented centerman as well. One of them is a player that you brought up, Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan O'Reilly really took off in terms of his national notoriety in 2019. When the Blues won that cup, he was considered to be one of the main factors, no pun intended there, because of what he was doing defensively to shut down the opposing top line. Ryan O'Reilly went out there, and he was the dude. He won the Selke Trophy that year, and then he was in top 5 Selke consideration for each of the next 3 seasons. Was immediately top of mind when anybody would talk about, okay, who should we put into that Selke conversation? That's kind of similar to the Gold Glove Awards, right? Once you win one, you're going to be in consideration for it for like the next 5 years unless there's just an obvious reason and your play completely dips off. But otherwise, it becomes about, okay, what's your reputation, right? I would say the same thing is true to a degree with Barkov. When they won the President's Trophy that year, that was a regular season piece of it, but also when they went on that playoff run over the next couple of seasons, you really saw his name start to come into the forefront for everybody, where people were talking about, man, you know who's one of the most underrated players in the league? Alexander Barkov. What a player. Look at everything he brings to the table. The points, the defense, the face-offs, everything that you could ask for from a center, he provides that. Leadership as well. I think if Robert Thomas wants to be considered one of the top centermen in the league, that's probably the way that it happens. It's similar to Barkov, where it's like, man, he does everything. He is a points producer, but also defensively among the best in the league. He does provide some leadership to the team as well. That is your path for him to be in that kind of a spotlight.
I think there's 3 guys on this team that have that opportunity in this postseason. I think it's Robert Thomas, I think it's Pavel Buchnevich, and I think it's Jordan Kyrou. I think those 3 guys are... 2 of them, I mean, we've had a lot of national pundits on that have given their opinion on Jordan Kyrou that thinks he's a star, but obviously, you know, the details are something that they've talked about. I think Pavel Buchnevich is a guy that's underrated that doesn't get talked a lot about, and frankly, some of his numbers have underperformed these last couple of years. Robert Thomas, we just touched on, and Jordan Kyrou. If these 3 guys can have a series in this postseason, the narrative goes from the Blues are a team that's pack mentality and they just don't have, you know, the checklist that The Athletic puts out there. They go from that to, okay, well, they got a sniper who scores in the postseason. They've got a centerman who is a elite at every area, and they've got a 2-way forward that can play defense just as much as he can score goals. I mean, Pavel Buchnevich scored 5 goals in his last 6 games of the regular season.
He was on a tear.
Those 3 guys can change the narrative that they are viewed in the National Hockey League. And it's not just the postseason. I think it's this series. Because if you win this series, nobody's expecting them to. And if those 3 guys are the stars because of it, then the start conversation's about them.
I would throw out one other name into that conversation. It's not a forward, it's defense. I would say Parayko. I don't think Parayko.
That's a good point.
I think this is the first year you're starting to see Parayko get some of that recognition, especially from The Athletic.
No,
but
he'll never give it to him.
This is the first time that you started to really see conversations around Parayko because he was starting to bring that offensive element to his game, and then it just kind of disappeared when he got hurt, when he missed during that 12-game winning streak for the St. Louis Blues. Now he's back. He's healthy. This will be his chance to be, for the first time, or the first time I would say where you actually feel comfortable with his pairing mate in the playoffs, where you say, okay, now it's his time to shine, to really shut down that team. And the other guy that I would throw under the radar defensively, too, would be Broberg. Broberg kind of showed it last year for the Oilers. A lot of people viewed that as more of a one-off when they got to the Cup. I mean, it led to his offer sheet, if we're being honest. If Army doesn't see that from him in the playoffs, Philip Broberg's not a St. Louis Blue. He's got another chance to do that again this season, to just replicate what he did with the Oilers last year in the playoffs.
You know who we haven't talked about at all? It's kind of interesting, given the fact that he was one of their best players all year long.
Fowler?
Jordan Kyrou.
Oh, yeah.
We have not had a second of conversation about Jordan Kyrou leading into these playoffs. And I find that to be interesting because while his game, you probably wouldn't expect it to translate super well to the postseason, he's been their best goal producer over their last 2 playoff runs. Yeah. He's been the guy that has been great for them. He was awesome in that series against Minnesota, and then he was really the only one scoring against Colorado.
But if you remember, he wasn't the go-to guy. Tarasenko was the go-to guy in those 2 series. He was the one that performed because of the mismatches.
Sure, but I think that is also going to be out there in this series. That's part of the value of him being on that second line, is that you can use him. He doesn't have to go out there every time against the Scheifele line. He can go up against that second line, which, as we know, because of the injuries for the Winnipeg Jets early on in this series, at least, you could have a real mismatch there when Jordan Kyrou on the ice.
That's why the Dylan Holloway injury is so frustrating for the team, because I hope Snuggerud can play there. He was the one that I said should be on that line, and frankly, they looked good against Utah. That's the mismatch. That's how you exploit Winnipeg, your speed, because they've got slower defensemen. And you know how you beat them? Off the rush. You beat them through the neutral zone. And you know what that line did so well when Holloway was healthy? Kyrou and Holloway would get 2-on-1s nonstop because of the speed factor. So I'll be really curious to how Jimmy Snuggerud handles this type of moment, because this is unlike anything he's ever experienced. And Winnipeg's big, they're physical, they're going to push you around. But, man, if he can get some speed and some chemistry with Jordan Kyrou, I think they can have the same impact that a Holloway. You're right. Like, nobody's talking about him, and I think nobody's talking about him because of the loss of Dylan Holloway.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, how do the hot teams generally do in the postseason? It feels like that's one of the underrated storylines for the Blues going into this year's playoffs. Is this something that can transfer into the playoffs, or did they immediately get shut down right after they went through that hot streak? We'll talk about that, give you some of the numbers behind it next year on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
It's time for a Blues playoff report presented by English Sweep Fireplace and Chimney Restoration. Schedule your chimney inspection at EnglishSweep.com.
The Blues were one of the best teams in the NHL over the final couple months of the regular season. So the question then becomes, all right, how do these teams typically do? Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. The Athletic wrote about this in their write-up of the Blues versus the Jets series preview earlier today. They wrote the following. In the post-COVID era, there have been 23 different teams that played 700 hockey or better in the final 2 months of the regular season. The Blues are now among those teams. Of the past 23 to do so, 13 of them made it past the first round. That's pretty good. 13 out of 23. You'd take those odds. That's above 500, right? That's a plus. On the other hand, many of them were supposed to win in the first round of this series, which makes them a bit different from what we're witnessing with the Blues. Even if you expect them to win, that's more than fair. The Vegas odds, those types of things, the probabilities are stacked against them right now. They are not considered the favorite in this series. 18 of those 23 teams that played the way the Blues did down the stretch were favored entering the first round series. 12 of those 18 went on to win. Okay, so that leaves 5 teams that played as well as the Blues did down the stretch this season and then ended up in the postseason that were underdogs. Only one of those 5 went on to win in their series. Who was it, of course? The 2022 St. Louis Blues. That was the series that they had against the Minnesota Wild. If you remember, Alex, I think it was 16 of the last 19 games, the Blues had a point at least in those games. I think it was like 14 out of 16 that they had won. They were on this crazy stretch. That was the Nick Leddy year where they bring him in. The defense looked solidified. They had the amazing depth of scoring. I think it was 9 20-goal scores that year. And we went into the first round and we're like, what are we missing? The Blues are obviously a very good team, but nobody is picking them against the Minnesota Wild. Somebody explained this to me. And I remember we talked to Wyshynski and we were like, can you help us understand what's going on here? And he's like, nah, man, I'm picking the Blues. Cool, sounds good. So, thanks, Greg. Alex, when you see this, of the 5 underdogs that played as well as the Blues did, only one of them were able to advance. It was the 2022 Blues. How does, if at all, that influence how you view this series between these two teams?
I mean, it doesn't influence, to me, the series because a couple of things play into the playoffs. One is, do you get puck luck? Because, I mean, even Craig Berube said when the Blues won the Stanley Cup final in 2019, he's like, you can talk about what we did. He's like, sometimes the bounces go your way, i.e. that Dallas Stars Game 7 when it doesn't go in the net and you don't lose in overtime with that wraparound by Jamie Benn. So some of it is that. I do think what plays into this in terms of the underdog factor and why I can see a little bit of the 2021-2022, there's just no expectations from the team that is the underdog, right? Like, you're going into this with nothing to lose. Whereas the opposition, because at the time, remember, they were the underdog in the Minnesota Wild series.
Correct.
Minnesota was in the middle of this, hey, we've got no salary cap. We can't really do much. Like, this is the time where we have to pounce and win hockey games. And they crumbled. I think that can happen in this series. You know, I know they weren't underdogs in this one, but I'm a little surprised if they weren't. But the Florida Panthers, when they went into that first round against the Boston Bruins, because Florida – they got into the playoffs with 92 points. Remember, that was the team that was bad early on, and then they went on that stretch from January on, and Matthew Tkachuk had the quote of like, hey, we've been playing playoff hockey for the last 3 months. I think that falls into a little bit of this as well, to where, look, Winnipeg is going into this feeling fat and happy. They haven't had to deal with a whole lot. Now they've got some injuries, but the underdog factor helps the Blues because they've got nothing to lose. If they fail in this game, if they lose in game 1, people aren't asking questions of, well, how can you lose this game? No, people are like, yeah, you probably weren't expected to win this one. And one more, because Joey mentioned this. I remember Steve Ott in that series against the San Jose Sharks. I think he referenced this with us yesterday. You know, that series, everyone was looking at San Jose because they were one of the best teams. And people were like, oh, San Jose, it's like, what's going on here? Steve Ott, after they lost game 1, was like, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. And then they did. So I think that plays into this a little bit in terms of the underdogs possibly not having a whole lot of success, but there's not a lot of expectations on the Blues in this one.
Yeah, I don't read too much into those numbers either because it would be shocking to me if they were favored, even if they did play as well as they did down the home stretch, because they're going against a President's Trophy winner.
By the way, Alex, just on the Florida point real quick, T-Bone, I am curious your thoughts on this. Florida did not have a 700 points percentage down in the final 2 months of the regular season that year, so they did not qualify. That's why they weren't part of this. Go ahead, T-Bone.
Yeah, it's just for me when I see those numbers, like, look, I get it. It is, to me, hey, the Blues, to your point, Alex, are playing with house money right now. There is no pressure on the St. Louis Blues. They've accomplished everything they needed to this season already, which I know sounds weird to say, but the goal for the Blues coming into the season was, hey, we want to make the playoffs. And from the outside looking in, at least from us as a media perspective, for some of us, Alex was in on they should be a playoff team this year. For me at BK, it was, hey, we just want to see some of the young guys take steps forward. I mean, you've accomplished the season goals, which feels weird to say. So you don't have the pressure of what the Jets are, and the Winnipeg Jets are under the pressure of, hey, if we don't make a deep playoff run, one, the season's probably a failure. Two, the organization might have to relocate, by the way. The Winnipeg Jets are in serious trouble of potentially facing relocation if they don't sell out these playoff games and they don't go on a deep playoff run because the Jets fan base is looking at them going, we've seen this before. We don't care that you're having success in the regular season. They are where the St. Louis Cardinals have been the last couple of years, which is we don't care that you're winning in the regular season. We want to see deep postseason runs. And you mentioned, we talked about Connor Hellebuck. He's a guy that's got some demons in the postseason that he's got to try and squash. Like, yeah, the Blues are playing with house money. I don't care what the Vegas odds would tell you about that.
The thing about this for me, BK, is this could be close to the closing of the window for Winnipeg, whereas it's the opening of a window for the Blues. And sometimes that really does impact. Florida and Boston, a great example of this. That was the first year of Matthew Tkachuk. That was the opening of what Florida is now. Look at what happened to Boston after that.
I do think it's a little different because Boston had like Patrice Bergeron was like 50.
For sure.
It was but Big Z, I think, was on that team.
He was gone by that point. But they had David Krejci as well. They brought him back for one season. You're right.
I mean, they were truly at the end of that window.
But I look at this and say, okay, well, Nikolai Ehlers is a free agent. Winnipeg's not sure if they're going to be bringing him back. They do have a couple of other players that are going to have to get paid sooner or later. And look, Connor Hellebuck doesn't get any younger, and he does play a lot of hockey. So I'm not acting as if Winnipeg's going to suck next year. They're going to be here for a couple of more years because you've got some really good players that are generally young. But it does feel like, you've only got a we saw this in 2019. You've got a small window of about 3 to 5 years to try and pounce. And think about it. The window was a couple of years ago when Connor Hellebuck was potentially going to be gone and they brought him back and they said, no, we're keeping him here. That was probably the start of that 5-year window that you needed to try and start competing in.
I think so. I just look at their ages, like Kyle Connor, 28, Mark Scheifele, 31, Ehlers, 28. I know that he's got the unrestricted free agency status that they've got to worry about, but Morrissey, 29, Velarde, 25, Pionk, 29. They've probably got another 3 years left in this window is what I would say. And their goalie, Connor Hellebuck, is 31. That's really the one that you've got to wonder about is how many more elite level years, not just good, but elite level years does Hellebuck have left in him? As of right now, it's hard to say that it's not at least another couple. I think their window is still open, so it's not quite the same level of pressure as it was for the Boston Bruins at that point in time where it was like, oh, it better be now or maybe next year, then it's over. But there's pressure on them, man, because to your point, T-Bone, like this is a team that has fallen flat. And it's been that way for really about 5 years, where they just can't seem to get out of their own way once they get into the playoffs. They go up against these legit Stanley Cup contenders, and they fall short. Mm-hmm. And that is where I do wonder if this year is a little bit different. Like, they lost to Colorado and Vegas over the last 2 years. I do not say this as any disrespect to the St. Louis Blues. The Blues are not what Colorado or Vegas were over the last 2 years. That's a very different opponent than what you had previously lost to. If you lose to the Blues, dude, they will be going through, like, panic mode in Winnipeg. This was supposed to be a retool year for the Blues. Yep. Vegas was all in. Colorado, all in. It was Stanley Cup or bust for those two teams. Right. This is vastly different.
Yeah.
So that is why, and I don't mean this to sound hot-takey. No, it's going to come out that way, but I don't mean for it to. If the Jets lose in Game 1, I don't know how they recover from that. Because what I just said about them potentially losing in this series, and you mentioned the ghost of years past with Hellebuck, and they've got the injuries that they're trying to overcome in this series. Blues potentially steal home ice advantage. You've got the ghost of 2019. You've got the Binnington thing from the Four Nations face-off. Like, if they lose in Game 1 of this series, all of the pressure, and I mean all of it, will be on Winnipeg for Game number 2.
Yeah.
and they'll have all of their media asking all of those questions. And even if they win in game 2, they'll be coming back here to St. Louis with 2 days off where they've got to answer all of those questions about, all right, the Blues are unbelievable on home ice. How are you going to find a way to not fall down 3-1 in this series? Like, I think if the Blues win game 1 of this series, they're winning the series. I think game 1 holds that much importance, and I think it might even go both ways. I think this series completely swings depending on who wins that first game.
Yeah, I agree, but I think game 2 is going to be a massive impact in this one, and here's why. Because even if Winnipeg wins game 1, there's still going to be a lot of, okay, look, game 2 not only could even up the series if Winnipeg takes the lead, but it does go back to Enterprise Center where they have been very good, and they did beat Winnipeg earlier this year. And on top of that, there's the 2 days off in between. And so if you're Winnipeg, you're leaving your home arena. You've got 2 days off where people are going to continue to ask those questions. But on the flip side of that, if you win game 1, if you're St. Louis, there's going to be pressure, but Winnipeg's going to be like, dude, we've been awesome on home ice. We'll get this evened up. If you lose game 2 and go down 2-0 to go to St. Louis where they're going to play for 2 games, I think that's where the pressure really starts because then they're handling.
Oh, if they're down 2-0, it's over. They're not coming back down 2-0.
They went down 2-0. They went down 2-0 in 2019 and beat the Blues 2 times at Enterprise Center. So, they could even up the series.
They'll be done.
I think, man, you are aggressive in this.
We're getting swept, aren't we?
We're totally getting swept.
I'm not telling you they're going down 2-1 or 2-0. I don't think that they will. But if Winnipeg goes down 2-0 in this series, the Blues will win this thing. I have zeroed out in my mind.
I think if it's 2-0 or 2-1, I think that's when I think the real pressure.
That's what I mean. I don't think panic sets in after you lose 1 game. I think panic sets in after you lose 2.
Okay,
that's where I am.
And if you get down 2-0 in a series, I don't think it's all of a sudden you're done. But it's, dude, what are we going to do? Because then the coach starts thinking like, man, do we make lineup changes? Do we start juggling the lines? And then you start doubting yourself. And as soon as you start doubting yourself, that's when the series falls apart quick.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, the Cardinals have some shockingly good rankings in Major League Baseball. I know they're a 500 team right now. What do you make of this, Alex? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. We've got plenty of play-by-play action happening for you this weekend on 101 ESPN. Starting tonight, the Fast Lane is wrapping up a bit early, so you can have NBA action starting right here, beginning at 5:30 tonight. On Saturday, we've got MLB play-by-play happening starting at 11:30, and of course, you can hear the Blues at Winnipeg for Game 1. Round 1 pregame is at 4 o'clock, and puck drop is at 5. Rounding us out on Sunday, the NBA action begins at 11:30 and MLB is at 5. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
All right, alongside Alex and T1 on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. The Cardinals aren't some great team. I'm not trying to sell you on that. They're 9-10 on the season. They've been hovering right around 500 really all year long thus far. Lost last night 4-1 on the road at New York. They need a good game tonight, and Miles Michaelis is on the mound, so we'll see. But T-Bone mentioned something to me yesterday, Alex. We did the Redbird Report. By the way, you can check that out on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. Also, wherever you get your podcasts, there's good conversations on Brendan Donovan, Thomas Ajayci, the six-man rotation, and what lies ahead for them and how they can win back fans. It's, again, all over there for you and the Redbird Report. But T-Bone brought up something yesterday kind of offhand that I found to be really interesting and, frankly, quite surprising. T-Bone, what did you say about the Cardinals and how they rank among some of the teams and a little bit more of the advanced numbers?
So when you take a look at WAR, which, take it or leave it, thank you.
Absolutely nothing.
The Cardinals are one of just 3 teams that are top 10 in hitters WAR and in pitching WAR so far this season. And the other 2 teams that they are with and in that category? That would be the mighty LA Dodgers and the mighty San Diego Padres. Those 3 teams, Cardinals, Padres, Dodgers, are the only 3 as of yesterday that led in hitters WAR and pitching WAR on the season. And what's weird when you say that is you look at the Dodgers, you look at what the Padres doing. They are living up to expectations. They're above 500. Those 2 are going to be in a race for the NL West all season long. And then you get the Cardinals, who are now below 500 after last night's loss. It just feels weird, right? It feels weird to say, hey, they're top 10 in pitching, which that is the most surprising to me. And then they are top 10 in offense when it comes to the wins above replacement. And yet they haven't been able to piece this all together yet. And I think BK brought up a good point yesterday on the podcast, which is it's just really the extra inning games that have really thrown them sideways. If you can flip those extra inning games, this team would be well above 500, and it is a different conversation, and there might really start to be some buy-in from some of the fan base, in my opinion.
It's so funny, man. You look at their pitching numbers, and, generally speaking, they're all really good. For the most part, it's basically a bad Michaelis start and a bad Fetty start and a blow-up by a couple of blow-ups by Roycroft. But otherwise, man, they've been good on the pitching side of things. You look at the hitting side of things, and whether you're looking at batting average or on base or slug or WAR, whatever it is that you want to look at, they're top 5 in basically every statistical category, and maybe there will be 1 or 2 here or there where they're at a minimum top 10. You look at the fielding numbers. They are, in some metrics, the best defensive team in Major League Baseball this year. Outs above average is one of them. They're number 1 in the league in outs above average so far this season. If you just look overall at wins above replacement from your entire roster, right? Again, people hate it. I get it. That's fair. It's just one measurement system, though. Number 1 team in the league this year in wins above replacement is the New York Yankees. Number 2, Chicago Cubs. They've played a couple extra games. Number 3, the St. Louis Cardinals. Alex T-Bone mentioned this, and it's if you went 500 in the games that you've gone into extra innings with, which is typically the expectation because it's a weird way to go about it, it's pretty fluky, you haven't taken advantage, you're 0-4. If you instead were 2-2 in the extra innings games, we're talking about a team that right now is 11-8 on the season, and we're feeling great about it through the first 19 games of the regular season. What do you make of all of this? The numbers that they have, the rankings where they're at right now relative to overall the record, unfortunately, that you're at.
I mean, what I make of it is it should be excitement for where the team is at right now. I mean, you're right. Like with those with extra innings, it's kind of like 3-on-3 overtime. It could go either way, so it's hard to really judge a team off of those. But to sit there and say almost midway through April, if they were 11-8, I did not see that coming.
No.
And the excitement would be, well, think of what got them to that 11-8. Their offense has been top 5 in Major League Baseball, frankly, top 3 in Major League Baseball in almost every single category. Your pitching has outperformed what the expectation was, and you're not talking about a couple of blow-up outings from a bullpen pitcher. So, I mean, what it would do and what I make of it is general excitement, because this wasn't supposed to be a team that could push for the playoffs. And now we would have been talking about 3 games over 500 after a somewhat difficult schedule to start the season off, when you talk about having to take on Minnesota at the beginning of the year with their pitching staff, when you talk about taking on Boston, and when you talked about taking on Houston and Philly. Yeah, there would be generally looking at this saying, okay, did this team turn the corner without us realizing they did it?
We've got a few of these, and I figured we'd get on. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Fellas, I know it's your job to talk about the local sports, but quit polishing a turd. We also got this from Shooter over on the YouTube chat at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. Are T-Bone and BK planning a parade down Market right now? Let's pump the brakes, fellas.
Can I?
Not yet.
Can I just say something? I saw a turd, and it was the last 2 years. This isn't a turd. Like, we didn't polish a turd last year. BK tried to. BK was like, hey, this isn't this bad.
They finished above 500.
We had Brad Osmus on to be like, hey, you could turn this around.
That was 2 years ago.
That one,
Again, 2 years. We saw turds.
That one was a turd.
We all agreed on that one, to be fair.
That one was a turd.
I mean, this isn't a turd. Now, does it turn into one as we move 2 more months into the season? Maybe, but I've seen bad. This isn't it yet.
The other thing is, I'm not telling you that the Cardinals are going to the playoffs this year. I'm not even telling you they're a great team. I'm telling you they've performed like one so far, though. And that's okay. Like, sometimes we can just take a step back. Where are you at 19 games through the regular season? How is this team performing? How is it comparing to what our expectations were? Let's just take stock of where we're at with the Cardinals right now. I saw a post from Talkin' Baseball, which is the John Boy podcast, earlier today. They were talking on there, and one of the hosts, I think, is Trevor Plouffe, and he was like, man, can we take a second to talk about the Cardinals? This is the national perspective on them. He was like, sure, cool, let's do this. And he said, I don't really know what to do with them. They're, to me, one of the most confounding teams in Major League Baseball, because I didn't have expectations coming into the season. I didn't know what they were going to be. They had a bunch of young guys. They didn't really do anything in the offseason. What do I do with them? T-Bone, you and I are watching a documentary right now over on Netflix about the Boston Red Sox. It was about the 2024 Boston Red Sox. And honestly, as I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself, man, there are so many similarities between the Cardinals this year and what the Red Sox tried to do last year of trying to get themselves back on track. They had been in last place in 3 of the previous 4 seasons in their division. The fan base had completely turned on the Red Sox. They did some interviews with the fans where they're like, fire everybody. Sell the team. Are they more interested in the brand or winning baseball games? They literally booed at their version of winter warm-up the team president as he took the stage, and he was like, listen, I get it. The only way that we can win you back is by winning baseball games. And then they just booed louder. So there are a lot of similarities between where the Red Sox were and where the Cardinals are right now. And what did the Red Sox do? Well, they started off really hot. And fans started to say, like, I don't know, maybe they could be a little something. And then it turned, and it went really poorly because of injuries for them. And what I find to be interesting is the Cardinals are having that moment with the injuries right now where Mason Wynn is on the injured list. You do have Ivan Herrera, who was early on in the season your best hitter, who's on the injured list. And instead of it completely sinking their season, they've responded pretty well, man. So I think there might be something here. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the ceiling is for a team like this that is going young, will definitely go through some slumps this year. We might be seeing one offensively right now. But I think it's okay to take stock in them and think, is there more than we expected from the 2025 St. Louis Cardinals to be there for us? And if so, man, this might be a fun team to watch this year. They might be able to take us on a ride similar to what the Blues did.
Well, that's just the thing. It's like we saw it at the beginning of the year. You guys weren't as sold on it as I was, to where it was like, hey, they've got at least something going. And it wasn't even like I was acting as if this team was going to win a Stanley Cup. Now I am. But then it was, dude, they're just better than where they were last year. We talked about it. It's like, look at the holes that they're filling that we didn't know if they had. You had Broberg, who was almost a point-per-game player. You had Parayko playing out of his mind. You had Dylan Holloway, who showcased his ability. There were areas that you were like, cool, this team is finding some of the answers that we had big question marks next to. That's what this is. That's why it's exciting for the Cardinals. It's not because I think this team's going to go on a run and become this wild card team that wins a World Series. No, it's because they finally got a middle-of-the-order bat in Brendan Donovan. They got a leadoff hitter. They've got some really good defense in the outfield. And guess what? They're starting to get some cost-controlled pitching.
Yeah, it is so wild how similar they feel to the Blues and the Red Sox. And the reason I'll hone in on the Blues is, to your point on, like, hey, you could see multiple pieces playing well, but it was tough to kind of figure out what the ceiling is going to be because they had the same start to what the Cardinals are having right now, which is kind of hanging around 500. Some things aren't going their way. What makes it interesting is it's a whole bunch of kind of unknowns still. And what I mean by that is, like, if I just told you, and I told the casual baseball fan, hey, Brendan Donovan is the Cardinals' 3-hole hitter. And I said, how do you think that stacks up with the rest of Major League Baseball? Everybody, like, put him, like, anywhere between 20 to 30th among the best 3-holes hitters in all of baseball. Dude, right now he looks like a legitimate 3-hole hitter, and that's what's making it hard to figure out with the St. Louis Cardinals is you've got so many young guys that are stepping up into roles that just doesn't feel like it should profile them. It reminds me of Holloway. Remember Holloway had I think it was with Bannister when he was still here. Holloway had a stretch where it was like, holy cow, we're starting to see the signs of what he ultimately ended up becoming for the Blues. And I was on the radio going, I think this is probably just a hot streak. And that's kind of what I've been saying to Brendan Donovan right now is, hey, you don't want him to be a 3-hole hitter for you. I wouldn't build around him being a core piece of the team. He's a nice complementary piece. He shouldn't be a guy that's this high in your order if you want to be a winning player. Maybe that changes by the time we get to the middle of the season or we get later on in the season. They just need to be competitive enough to give themselves a chance. Their season, I mentioned this yesterday on the Redbird Report podcast, their season is not the typical 6 months. Their season is 3 months. Otherwise, they may be selling off pieces come the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I, again, going back to that Red Sox documentary, it reminds me a lot of, like, some of their young hitters that just, they took off. They figured it out. Jarren Duran became a different version of himself. He was just a better player than he had been at any time previously. And, dude, seeing his struggles in the outfield, I couldn't help but think to myself, that's Jordan Walker.
Yep.
Like, I'm watching Jordan Walker with Jarren Duran's earlier version of himself where he struggled to just identify where the ball was going to go. He figured it out last year. Ended up becoming an all-star. And I think at the all-star break, he had, like, 15 triples or something like that. It was insane. Wilyer Abreu, he became the fully formed version of himself. It was his first full season at the big league level. Connor Wong went from being a guy that the previous season, in 2023, Connor Wong was a .235 hitter with no power whatsoever. Last year, .280 hitter with a little bit of pop, above league average offensively. It's like, okay, you might really have something there for yourself if you're the Boston Red Sox. That's what we're seeing with the Cardinals. It may not be perfect. The Red Sox were not a perfect team last year. But it could be something similar where you leave the season thinking to yourself, hey, we've got the roster that we can build around now. Now it's time to push. And that's what 2026 ultimately becomes about.
And you have a new person in charge at that time, which should spark even more optimism.
Well, that's where it will get interesting because I don't think you're there yet in the documentary. I promise I'm not spoiling anything. You can just look at the 2024 season. The fan base bought into the team, and even in the documentary, you get the sense as what happens is they were let down by the trade deadline. And that's where it will become very interesting if the Cardinals are in it, how Mo will approach it, because that's what I've always said. Hey, look, you can be winning baseball games. You don't supplement the team like the fan base is expecting. You're not going to pull the fan base completely back in.
He's Tanner. That's Alex. I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer. Chip Carey apparently has a favorite number. We'll let you hear it next here on 101 ESPN.
Live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios, this is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Cardinals lineup is out for today. If you're going to play along with the Fast Lane for their lineup game later on, go ahead and turn down your radio for the next 30 seconds or so. I promise that's all we'll need here. Alex, they are giving Lars Nootbaar the day off today. They're going up against a lefty. That makes a lot of sense. They're in the midst of this 13 games and 13-day stretch. Don't necessarily have an issue with them giving Lars Nootbaar a day off. He's a guy that's dealt with injuries, as we know, over the last few years. Cool. Give him a day off here today. Makes a lot of sense. But that does mean you need a new leadoff hitter. At times in the past against a lefty, you've seen Mason Wynn get that opportunity. Well, he's not an option right now because he's still on the injured list. He's expected to start his rehab assignment today, so you'd think he'll be back relatively soon. That means you need somebody else to lead off. You're going up against a lefty today, and Peterson, he is very good against left-handed hitters. They're going with Victor Scott in left field, getting the start at leadoff against a lefty pitcher tonight. I will be very curious to hear the explanation on that. I'm not saying it's like the wrong decision, but the numbers that I can find publicly available do suggest Scott not as good against lefties, and Peterson very good against left-handed hitters. He profiles, Scott does, as a decent leadoff option against righties, but I'm a little surprised they're going with that against a left-handed pitcher tonight.
I mean, the other options, you would say, what, Sajasi?
And I would say Sajasi's probably the guy, or you could argue Brendan Donovan. He's been very good against left-handed pitchers this season.
And I understand, but they're taking Donovan out of the 3 spot, correct?
Yeah, he's down to the 5 hole. It's Scott, Baker, Contreras, Arenado, Donovan. That's your top 5.
And see, that's the part to where it's like, that's the part I guess I would question a little bit, and I'd love to know Ollie's example, so I'm not just making assumptions, but to keep Contreras in the 3 hole, who has struggled this season, and I know he's a righty going up against lefty.
He did bump him down. Normally the 2 hole, they got Baker up there today.
Right, but you'd think that Donovan, since he's been so good and consistent, you'd keep him in the 3 spot. And if you're going to move him out of the 3 spot, why not put him at the number 1? Sajasi, I mean, I guess I can make the argument for, it's like, look, that's a tough spot to be in for a young player, but Victor Scott's a young player, and you're putting him in that position. So, yeah, a little odd. When I saw it when I was walking out to go to the restroom, and I looked at it, and I'm like, damn, this is an odd-looking lineup. But, I mean, look, when you get guys days off who are consistent in one spot, you have to make adjustments.
Yeah, I'll just be curious to hear what the explanation is, because I'm sure they have one. They're not just doing this willy-nilly. It's probably something, T-Bone, you mentioned this during the break, probably something about the way that he profiles David Peterson. Maybe he's got a specific pitch that they think Victor Scott is going to be really good against. Victor Scott was the guy that gave them arguably the best at-bats against Paul Skeens. And I know that's not a lefty, but maybe there's something specifically in this profile that they think Victor Scott profiles good against. I don't know.
And the other thing, too, could be he doesn't hit for average and his OPS is low, but he does get on base pretty well. Just got against lefties so far this year. I mean, it's a very small sample size, 350 on base. I mean, he's got the second or third best walk rate of anybody against a lefty this season among people with 15 plate appearances for the Cardinals this year.
Maybe
again, that's a small sample size, but I mean, that could be where, hey, he gets on base, boom, he steals an extra base. Now we've really got that right-handed lane. So I'll be curious to know what Ollie's explanation is.
He does have a pretty high walk rate, does David Peterson. 11% on the season, and that's been in line with where he's been at in his career. All right. Did mention before we went to break, Chip Carey, who I think does a great job on the Cardinals broadcast, him and Brad Thompson, they're fun to listen. And Chip, awful announcing noticed this. They tweeted this out a little bit ago. I wanted to play it for you. If you notice anything in here, he seems to have a favorite number on the broadcast this season.
Okay.
So Liberatore has reached the 69-pitch threshold. See if he can get Trout with number 70 here. Sonny Gray has his first strikeout. 69 strikeouts for Gray, away from 1,800. Let's see if Contreras can improve on that 069 average. He struck out his first time up. Pallante, a little more efficient. Strike on pitch 69. So 69 pitches for Majinski tonight. Mitch Keller, start number 69 on his home mound in Pittsburgh today. He's at 69 in total today. 69 pitches for Valdez. 27 of them have come in this inning. So 69 pitches for Matz. Here's 70.
So some of those is like, all right, he's up to 69 pitches through the first 3 innings,
The
whatever. Like, that makes sense.
one.
All right, there's some of these where it's like, you're looking for this. I noticed it last night. It was probably one of the first times that I've noticed it with Chip. He mentioned specifically on the broadcast yesterday, the ever-important 69th pitch of a game. It's like, what are you doing here, Chip?
It's a great pitch number, too.
The one that really gave it away for me was the
069 batting
well,
average.
that one and the Mitch Keller's 69th career homestart. Why? Wait, what?
There was another one, 69 games away from a milestone.
Yeah,
It's like,
69 strikeouts away from a milestone.
Personally, great
What?
job by Chip. You have to find a way to have some fun on the broadcast. And to find your favorite number and insert it as much as possible. Way to go, man.
Good for him.
Now I can't wait to look for it in all the
Yeah.
broadcasts moving forward.
Now that you've heard it, you'll never unhear it in
No,
the broadcast ever again.
Now I'd just like to see what the faces of everyone in the broadcast booth around Chip carry every time he references that number.
sure.
Like 69th pitch.
We'll have to ask Brett Thompson about that in our next conversation with him. All right, coming up in about 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk to a Jets insider, give us the perspective from the Winnipeg side of things heading into this series against the St. Louis Blues. But next, where do the Blues have an advantage in this series? Alex sees one specific spot. He'll tell you what that is next here on 101 ESPN.
Ferrario are broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
It's time for a Blues playoff report presented by English Sweep Fireplace and Chimney Restoration. Schedule your chimney inspection at EnglishSweep.com.
All right, so when you look at this series between the Blues and the Jets, there are ways that you can convince yourselves the Blues will win this series. But if you're looking for what is the advantage that they possess heading into it, Alex, I do find it to be a little difficult to say this is where they have a clear advantage. Because normally, I mean, there's probably 20 other teams the Blues could face in the playoffs, and I'd say, well, you have an advantage in net. I can't honestly say that with a straight face going into this one. I think you have the better big game goalie, but I don't know for sure that he's going to be better than Connor Hellebuyck. But you said coming into today's show, you think there is at least one spot where the Blues have a clear and obvious advantage heading into this series against Winnipeg. What is that?
Mike on defense. Defense. It's to me, there was no question about it. I think a lot of people will look at it and say, well, they've got Josh Morrissey, and he's the best defenseman on any team. I'd argue Colton Parayko, but fine, because Morrissey, I think, has put up 63 points this season. I look at top to bottom, the 6 guys that are going to be playing for the Blues, and to me, it's night and day. You've got Parayko and Fowler, who 2 guys, one has played over 1,000 games, the other's about 200 games away. You've got Falk and Broberg. Justin Falk, 20 games away in the regular season from 1,000, but it has played over 1,000. Broberg, who was in the Western Conference Final last year, Stanley Cup Final last year, and then Leddy and Suter as a third pair, who have combined for almost 2,700 games played in the National Hockey League. They've got 6 guys who every single defenseman has played at least in the conference final of their respective teams that they were a part of. And when you look at playoff experience, Parayko's got over 100 games played in the playoffs. Suter's got over 100 games played in the playoffs. Fowler, Leddy, Justin Falk. You've got more experience than what the Winnipeg Jets had. Now, I went back and looked at what the last 3 seasons have been like for the Winnipeg Jets in terms of defense. Their top 4 has been on their team for the last 2 postseason runs. It's Dylan DeMello, Dylan Sandberg, Neil Pionk, and Josh Morrissey. But then the other guys that they're talking about, Logan Stanley, who's played 4 games in the playoffs for them over the last 2 years, and they traded for Luke Shen. They've got experience, but why I give the Blues the upper hand is because they've got thousands of games experience. Lou Korek put this in his article earlier today. Combined, the Blues have 5,462 games played in the regular season. Most in the National Hockey League. Second closest is Carolina at 4,452. So I think that experience plays dividends when you get into big game situations like this, because when moments happen where you've got to find a way to ice the game, when moments happen when you have to find a way to eliminate certain elements and make adjustments on the fly, I'll take a group of guys who have played over 5,000 games versus a group of guys who have played close to 3,000 games.
So you want to hear the nerdy numbers that agree with you?
Sure.
You thought I was going to say go against you, huh?
Yeah.
You thought I was going to be like, yeah, that's great. Now here's what actually happened this year during the regular season. No, they actually completely back up everything that Alex Ferrario just said. Completely back you up. At 5-on-5 this year, I wanted to look this up to see, okay, what do the numbers say and how does that match or dissuade our eye test? Blues this year, high danger chances against. This is the entirety of the season. This is not fun with numbers where you're like, since the Four Nations face-off, Blues have been great, haha. No, the entirety of the season, high danger chances against. Blues allowed 659 of them. The Winnipeg Jets, 675. Just shots against on the season for the Blues versus the Winnipeg Jets all year long at 5-on-5. 1785 for the Blues, 1795 for the Jets. Basically the exact same numbers. Expected goals against on the season. 159 at 5-on-5 for the Blues. Guess what for the Winnipeg Jets?
What?
159.
Nice.
The exact same. So it really comes down to, well, during the regular season, I don't know if this will be the case during the postseason or not, but during the regular season, the Jets had slightly better results defensively at 5-on-5 than the Blues did because of goaltending. Because Connor Hellebuyck was just better during the regular season than the Blues goalies were. No shot against the Blues goalies. Hellebuck's probably winning the Vezina, might win the MVP of the year. Right. So, again, no shot against the Blues. But defensively, man, whether you want to look at the experience that they have, you want to look at just the overall results that they had this season, it does go along with what you're saying. The Blues have either an advantage there or, at a minimum, it is basically tied the exact same in terms of what they allow defensively.
545 games played in the playoffs combined for those 6 defensemen that are playing in this game. And I mean, look, maybe it's just me playing fun with numbers that doesn't really make an impact in this one. But Jim Montgomery said it yesterday after their practice. He said regular season is about adjustments from game to game. Playoffs is about adjustments from period to period, from shift to shift. And because you've got 6 guys that have so much experience that all have played in the playoffs, and you're talking of a couple of guys who have recently played in the playoffs in terms of Philip Broberg and Ryan Suter. These are guys that understand the levity of what's taking place in these games. And when Winnipeg finds a way to adjust to the Blues, that's where you have 6 guys on the ice that can handle any scenario. And you've got 6 guys that are comfortable with playing a lot of minutes. Logan Stanley's a guy that traditionally plays about 10, 12 minutes a hockey game. That means you're either going to be playing him more or you're going to be playing your top guys more. And that's where the Blues, they can roll 3 defensive pairs out there and be fine with it that even out. Whereas the last couple of years, late in games, Colton Parayko was playing 25 minutes a night. So I do really think that is an advantage that people aren't giving enough credit to the Blues for.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to talk to a Jets analyst from up in Winnipeg to see how they are viewing this series. But next, how much will special teams play into this series? And I want to ask Alex, we talked about Dylan Holloway, the injury that's obviously going to affect the Blues in this series. I don't know that we've talked enough about the injuries that are going to affect the Winnipeg side of this series. We'll get into that next year on BK and Ferrario.
Broadcasting live from the Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We continue discussing the Blues versus the Jets series. That's really going to be our entire 1 o'clock hour, just previewing what we're going to see tomorrow night in game number 1. We'll certainly break that down in its entirety on Monday here on the show as well. Alex will have full coverage for you tomorrow right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Coming up in about 10 minutes, we'll talk about it from the Winnipeg perspective. Alex, you brought up something earlier today. We're talking about how do we break this thing down? What are the biggest storylines? We talked about the goalie situation. We talked about the pressure that's going to be on Winnipeg in this series. You just brought up the biggest key in terms of what the advantage is for the Blues, which is their defensive core. I don't know that we've talked a lot about special teams so far. The Blues special teams have been very good since the Four Nations face-off. Winnipeg is really good on those in general as well. How much of a role do you expect that to play in this series?
If you were to ask me the slice of pie, I'd say like 25% of the pie, because typically you don't see a lot of penalties in the playoffs. Now, I think both sides are going to play a physical brand of hockey. There's going to be a lot of extracurriculars, and it's going to come down to what the officiating crew is. Are they a crew that likes to make it about themselves, or do they let things play out? But you're going to see certain aspects of the game be dictated by special teams. And I think this is a opportunity for the Blues to pounce on their opponent. 5-on-5, you just gave the numbers. Like, it's pretty even in terms of how they go about their styles, and Jim Montgomery's making an emphasis on it. But if you look back at last year when Winnipeg got bounced in the playoffs by Colorado, they had a 23% power play, which ranked 7th in the National Hockey League amongst playoff teams. Not a bad number for a 5-game series. Their penalty kill was 62.5%. And a lot of the goals that were scored came at even strength in that series. But when Colorado got a power play, they were lights out against that team. And what it does is it changes the way the opposition plays you. So if the Blues are going to play a physical brand of hockey like Joey told us yesterday, then Winnipeg has to be very cognizant of what they do post-whistle. Because if they go to the penalty box and the Blues power play is striking hot, well, that's how you hurt the team. Do I think it's going to be the reason they win this series? Absolutely not. I do think, though, it is a make-or-break scenario that if your penalty kill struggles against Winnipeg's power play, then it could give them the leverage in terms of momentum. If your power play struggles against their penalty kill, it could give them the leverage. But they're without 2 of their power play threats in at least the first 2 games, maybe the entire series. Boy, if you can sit there and be 100% on the power play and you can still play the physical brand of hockey and even go 25% of the playoff series against them, to me, that's how you win at least 1 or 2 games.
I've been looking this up, Alex, in terms of what the Jets were after the Gabe Vilardi injury. It took place in late March, so they've played almost a month of hockey without him. I think it's like 12 games that they've played without him. Man, it almost looks as if they're a different team without Gabe Vilardi on the ice, especially offensively. Defensively, there's a difference, but offensively, it's a pretty drastic difference. You look at them, goals for per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. When Vilardi is on the ice, they were at roughly 3 goals per game, one of the best in the league. The only other teams that were above them at 5-on-5 goals per at even strength, Washington, Carolina, Dallas, Tampa, Colorado. In other words, the top 5 offenses in the NHL this year, basically. And then there's Winnipeg. When he went out of the lineup, it was 2.5 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which is like roughly middle of the pack. You add up what they did on the power play. Pre-injury, number 1 power play in the NHL. 30%. They were a 30% clip on the power play when they had Vilardi out there. No surprise, he's one of the best power play players on their team. Yeah. Since he went down, 20%. A 10% drop, which is good for 20th in the NHL since Vilardi went down. The reason I bring this up, it's not just Vilardi anymore. Yeah. Now they're also without Ehlers for them. So this is a team that is built on their depth of scoring, much like the St. Louis Blues. Yes, they have Kyle Connor. He's amazing. Yes, they have Scheifele. He's amazing as well. But when you add in Ehlers and Vilardi, That's really where you get them to be this special team offensively, especially at even strength and certainly on the power play. Man, for all the talk about who this team is, what they've been, they're not that team right now. Just like the Blues are not the team that they were for the vast majority of that 12-game winning streak because they don't have Dylan Holloway, and it completely changes that second line.
Yep.
Neither is Winnipeg. So for all the talk about Holloway, I've been leading the charge on that conversation. I assumed they would get at least one of Velarde or Ehlers back for this game. It sure sounds like they're going to have neither.
At least for the first 2 games, and it's why it's so important to at least come out of this first 2 in Winnipeg in a 1-1 series.
How does that change for you, how you view the first couple of games?
I think it gives
those injuries.
It puts the Blues in an even playing field. Like, they've got the better goaltender. We just talked about how I think you've got a better defense, and even without Ehlers and Velarde, they still have Scheifele and Connor who can be difference makers, and they do have depth, a third and fourth line. Adam Lowry, to me, is a guy that can step up when he needs to. But if it would have just been Velarde and Holloway, I still would have been like, cool, you plucked one of their best offensive players away and you plucked ours away. 1-on-1, I'm okay with it. But when you take 2 away, it dictates 2 lines at even strength that have been good for you offensively. It dictates the power play. Again, Ehlers has been a guy that plays some of the, or Velarde's a guy that plays some of the penalty kill, I believe. You're taking away some of the best assets that make Winnipeg who they are. And when that's the case, at least for the first 2 games, again, it doesn't sound like Ehlers is going to be back for this series. Ken Wiebe can give us a little bit more information coming up in a bit. But let's say they get Velarde back for games 3 and games 4. Cool. If you find a way to take a 2-0 series lead and they're just getting him back, man, that's how you pounce. So it does change the way I look at these first 2 games because at even strength, they're not the juggernaut that they were all in the regular season.
And I know being on the road, it does change some things in terms of how you can match up. But, man, if you're Monty, you want that Thomas line out there every single time that Scheifele and Connor are on the ice.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because, man, that depth of scoring totally changes without Velarde and Ehlers out there. They have 4 20-goal scorers this year. It's Velarde and Ehlers, those are 2 of them, and then Scheifele and Connor. So right now, there is one line that they can produce that has a 20-goal scorer on it. It's it. It's just that one line. It's the top line for them. Beyond that, Perfetti had 18, Niederreiter had 17, Lowry had 16, Iafallo had 15. So it is one line that has 3 15-plus goal scorers, and then one other line that has 2 15-plus goal scorers, and then there's Adam Lowry as well, who's a really good player. He's one of the best captains in the NHL. He's awesome. There's a really good player out there that you got to be worried about. But
we have the receipts, man.
There are just fewer players that you have to be aware of on the ice, which means, man, that second line for the Blues, to me, is the key.
Yeah.
It's the key to the series while you're out there, and it might even be the key to the series when you get back home. Jordan Kyrou should have a massive advantage in this series, dude. If they're able to match up as often as possible with Thomas and Booch against that top line for Winnipeg, you should be able to tilt the ice when those other 3 lines are out there.
Yeah, like to go X's and O's with you guys, I agree completely. Thomas is going to match up with that Scheifele line. I want Shen and Kyrou and Snuggerud matched up with that second line. I want the WTF line against the Adam Lowry line, big on big. And then your third line, Bolduc and Joseph and Sundqvist, goes up against Winnipeg's fourth line because there you can exploit. There's your offensive advantage with a guy that can be a 30-goal scorer in the NHL. And guys, Oscar Sundqvist should also strike some fear into the Winnipeg Jets fans because that 2019 series, now I know he's like 5 years older and he's got 2 new knees, but he had 2 goals and 4 points in that series against Winnipeg. So that's the depth and the mismatches that I think you can create because of these injuries.
We got this from the text line. Jets are minus 190 to win this series. What do you think their odds would be if those 2 guys were healthy? Minus 250.
Yeah, I was going to say minus 250, minus 275, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really big deal that they're missing those guys. So much so that, man, as we continue talking about this and we work through some things.
No, well, you work through some things. I've been pretty steadfast in this all along.
I don't know, man. I think the Blues have a real shot in this series.
Damn it. No, go back to where you were.
I'll still pick Winnipeg just for the hell of it because it's better for our show. And it's better,
to where you
frankly,
were.
better for me just to avoid the potential of the BKL. But, man, these injuries really changed some things for me. I thought they were going to be potentially healthy by game 2 or so, and I thought going into game 1 they'd at least have one of these 2 forwards for them. The fact that they're going to potentially be without both is a huge deal, and I don't want to understate just how big of a deal it is. They've been a different team without Velarde on the ice.
Look, we saw what it looked like when the Blues had to start juggling lines to find chemistry and be like, hey, who do we got? Ehlers only missed like a game or two at the end of the season. So they're still juggling with line chemistry. Like Velarde's been out for some time. So like they've figured that out. Iafallo, I think, fits in well. He's a lot of what Ivan Barbashev used to be, where it's like, dude's a third liner, but he could play on the top line if you need him to for a short sample size. But line chemistry doesn't just snap immediately and you figure it out. So could be two games that they're trying to experiment with, which the Blues have their chemistry back now that Snuggerud works so well with Shannon Kyrou.
Cat Dad Gamer said on the YouTube chat, youtube.com/101ESPN Alex Sonny didn't get new knees. He got refurbished knees. Well played.
That's even dangerous.
Well played by you. Coming up next, we're going to get the Jets perspective from a Winnipeg Jets insider here on BK and Ferrario.
.101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. This SportsCenter update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. It's a busy time in St. Louis sports this weekend. First of all, the Cardinals are continuing their 4-game series against the Mets tonight. That pitch kicks off at 6:10. And then tomorrow, the Battlehawks are in Arlington taking on the Renegades at 11:30. Continuing on Saturday, we have round 1, game 1 in Winnipeg for the Blues. Pregame right here on 101 ESPN starts at 4 o'clock, and then puck drop will be at 5. And then STL City tomorrow is hosting Vancouver at 7:30. I'm Jordan Deacon. The SportsCenter update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. We're broadcasting live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. E&B Granite, Bernie Fedurko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Breaking down the Blues versus the Jets all day long, but we do so from the St. Louis perspective. Now we are doing so via the Winnipeg Jets beat writer for the Winnipeg Free Press. He is Ken Wiebe, joining us via the Callier and Thompson hotline. You can watch him on the Kenny and Rennie show. You can find them over on YouTube. You can find all of his work on Twitter as well, at Wiebes World, WIEBES World over on Twitter. Ken joins us now via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Ken, we appreciate the time, man. Looking forward to this series starting tomorrow afternoon in Winnipeg. What for you is the biggest storyline that you're going to be monitoring from the Jets' perspective in this series?
Yeah, great to be with you guys as usual. We'll be looking forward to getting back to Missouri shortly. But, first 2 games, what we'll be watching closely, the battle between the goaltenders, right? I mean, we know that the Shen brothers storyline is definitely an interesting one as well, but with Luke and Braden going head-to-head, these guys are very close. They talk almost every day, but the lines of communication probably going to be on hold for a little bit of time. It's going to be tough on the families, but 2 really good competitors on both sides there. But for me, I mean, obviously we know that there's history between Jordan Binnington and Connor Hellebuyck, recent history at the Four Nations face-off. Again, these guys aren't going against one another, but what we know is that last line of defense always so important and critical in a series. So Binnington has had the upper hand, both at the gold medal game and in the 2019 playoff series. So I would expect a pretty hungry Connor Hellebuyck. And again, Connor didn't get into it, and he's not the kind of guy that talks about the other goalie anymore. But, he's a guy who's had a Hart Trophy caliber season. And we know the playoffs, not that Hellebuyck is to blame, but, he's given up 42 goals in his last 10 playoff starts and has a 2-10 record. So that is something that, 2-8 record, I guess that would be in 10 starts. So he'll be looking to bring that regular season form into the playoffs. But, I mean, there's tons of storylines, but those are the 2 that stand out to me right out of the gate.
Ken, on the Hellebuyck front, I've heard that same narrative, and I've talked about it, and it's like, look, I mean, they played Colorado, who was a juggernaut last year, so you'd expect that team to go out there and just play so well. But how much of Hellebuyck's struggles in the postseason do you believe is from fatigue for how much he's used in the regular season? And is that a concern for how many games he played this year on top of the Four Nations?
Yeah, absolutely zero concern this time around. In years past, maybe, especially the Vegas series, I think there would have been a little bit more fatigue there, to be honest. But the Jets have one of the best environments in terms of the defensive structure and what they give up these days. So although we know a lot of teams are going to more of a goalie share 1A and 1B system, Connor's been able to get plenty of rest down the stretch and valuable rest where it's a 2 or 3 day break rather than just a 1 day off here and there. So he was asked specifically about it. He's a rhythm goaltender, guys. He is a guy who loves to play a lot. And because he's not facing as many high-danger chances as he did, say, in the 2019 year when the Jets were, not maybe as good defensively, I think maybe you could use that as a narrative. But for me, even with the 3 extra starts, I mean, for him, 66 is not a crazy number. I know it's a high number for the modern goaltender, but I think they were able to monitor his rest. And because of Eric Comrie's ability to provide quality backup net mining, much like Joel Hofer has done for the St. Louis Blues, Hellebuyck in fatigue, that will not be something that factors into the series at all. And I don't think it was really a factor last year either, because, again, Laurent Brossoit was one of the best backups, if not the best backup in the league last year. So Workload in front of him has definitely improved, so I don't see that being a storyline at all. I mean, I understand why some folks may think that it is, but I don't think that it's going to be a factor at all. I think both those goalies are going to be super fresh down the stretch, and they'll be playing at the top of their games.
Ken, when we get deeper on into the playoffs, injuries are always a concern for teams. But this year it feels like just in the Western Conference in general, there are a lot of injuries that are kind of coming up to the forefront. For the Blues, it's Dylan Holloway. He's going to be out probably for the entirety of the series, maybe for the entirety of the playoffs. The Jets have a couple injuries of their own with Gabe Vilardi and Nikolai Ehlers. Can you give us an update? What's going on with them? What's their status? And do you anticipate those guys playing in this series?
Yeah, Ehlers, I think, is in a similar bucket to Holloway. Obviously, he got downgraded to week last week there by Scott O'Neill. So I don't expect him in this series either. It'll be a surprise if he plays in the second. No clarification, but he's been dealing with something with foot or lower body previously after a collision with Pavel Dorofeev in Vegas. So I don't expect to see him in the series. So I think that's probably again, different style of players, but that's probably kind of a little bit of a wash when it comes to the injuries in terms of their impact that they've had on their respective teams. And then in terms of Vilardi, guys, he has been skating, so he's also been out since March 23rd when he suffered an upper body injury. I do expect him before the end of the series. I don't expect him in the first two games for sure. Can he get back because of the 2-day break between 3 and 4? That I'm not 100% sure of, but I would expect him in that 4 or 5 range if he continues to progress and if there are no setbacks. So, but he hasn't started skating with the team yet. So to me, that his return is not imminent, but I could see him returning before the series is over. But so his status is much more clear than Ehlers' would be.
As a follow-up on that, Ken, how much has that impacted their team? I know for Ehlers, it's a very recent injury, so it may be a little bit harder to say. I can just look at the numbers. You've watched them day to day. The goals for at 5-on-5 have gone down pretty significantly. Power play looks like it's had a pretty significant drop-off since the Vilardi injury. How much does that affect your view of what they are offensively, what they are in terms of their depth of scoring going into this series?
Sure. I mean, Ehlers is a dynamic player. You guys have seen it for years here. His playoff numbers haven't mirrored his regular season success, but still, he's an impact player on the second line. And his promotion to the top power play unit has been one of the reasons that they were the best power play in the NHL this year. And Vilardi is the facilitator on that power play. So it is obviously, I'm not trying to pretend that it's not an impact, but the thing about the Jets, guys, they had 13 guys in double digits this year. 2 of them are defensemen in Josh Morrissey and Neil Pionk, but that means they had 11 of their forward group, 11 members of the forward group in double digits. So I don't see depth scoring being an issue for them. They're fortunate enough to have a guy like Alex Iafallo who goes from the fourth line to jumping on the top line. And is there some drop-off between his stats and Vilardi's? Of course there are. But this is a guy who still had 15 goals. He's used to playing with Andrzej Kopitar from his time in L.A., real big worker bee, and also he brings a defensive element to that line that Vilardi, again, not saying Vilardi's a poor defensive player, but he doesn't bring the same defensive consciousness to the top line as Iafallo does. So although there's a bit of drop-off in the offense, maybe they're a tougher line to be scored on. So I do think it's a limited factor, but I mean the Jets' depth has been one of the reasons that they've had as much success as they've had, and I don't think that it's an issue. And the wild thing, guys, I mean they've called up Jared Anderson-Dolan, who has ample experience from his time in LA, had a tough year with the Moose, but he's come onto that fourth line and given them kind of an energy element similar to what Toropchenko brings on the fourth line for the Blues. So I don't see depth being a factor at all for the Jets. But having said that, I mean, their top power play has not been as effective and efficient as it had been for the majority of the year, either coming out of Four Nations. So there's pressure at both 5-on-5 and on the power play with those two guys being gone. That's absolute. You guys nailed it on that one.
Ken, when you're a President's Trophy team, it's hard to find weaknesses on that roster. But if the Blues were to have success in this series, what area of the Jets would they be able to exploit?
Yeah, I'm not sure about exploit, but definitely what they'll be looking to get to. I mean, they've watched everyone can say it's a new season, and that is 100% accurate. But to see how Vegas and Colorado had success against the Jets was especially last spring, Colorado, I think 12 of their 24 goals in the series came on tips and screens. So I assume they'll be working hard to get to the front of the net, make life difficult on. They're not a small defense core, but they have some, average size guys there. And, one of the reasons the Jets brought in Luke Shen is because their ability to box out needed to improve. So I think that Shen has really stabilized that portion of things. But, I mean, if you're looking at past tough experiences for the Jets, that has been one of them. Certainly last spring, and also I think at times against Vegas too. So, and we know that the Blues have done a much better job of getting to the blue paint under Jim Montgomery when they got back to their kind of hardworking mentality and identity. So that's one area where I think they're going to be trying to get to the blue paint. I mean, traffic around Hellebuck is something you need. I mean, this is the best goaltender in the NHL. So you want to make life as difficult as possible in those regards. So that's one of the areas I would say. But I mean, at the same time, it's hard to, point to the Jennings Trophy winner for giving up the fewest goals in the last 2 years and say, oh, hey, their defense is vulnerable. Well, I don't think they're vulnerable, but if you have the best goalie in the world and your forward group is pretty good, and does that mean your defense it would be ranked third? I guess, but I mean at the same time, you guys know this from watching, and we've talked about how much we've been looking forward to the pairing for years. I mean, look at how Josh Morrissey played with Colton Parayko at the Four Nations face-off. I mean, those two guys are going to be absolutely omnipresent in the series. They'll be here, they'll be there, they'll be everywhere in terms of their respective teams. So I'm expecting that to be, again, the Jets' defense is not a weakness, but again, when you have the best at certain other things, and it's going to be something that they're going to have to be under attack to some degree. I mean, but it's the same as anything. The way the Blues play, they're going to be wanting to dump the puck in the corners of Pionk and Morrissey because they want to make life as difficult as possible for them. I mean, that's what any good team will do, right? So, yeah, I mean, and then special teams, right? Jets special teams, penalty kill improved greatly, but their power play hasn't been as good since February or since coming out of Four Nations. So I would think special teams always a factor. We know Jim Montgomery is an excellent in-game tactician. I mean, obviously there's history with Montgomery playing a little bit of time with the Manitoba Moose. Scott Arniel was the assistant coach, I think, that year when Monty was here. So, another fun little under-the-radar storyline. And for Arniel, I mean, I don't think he's getting enough love for the Jack Adams. Everyone assumes that's going to automatically go to Spencer Carberry because he brought a team from 16th to 2nd. I would argue, too, that going from tied for 4th in the NHL to 1st, I mean, again, it's not as much distance travel, but to be able to do what the Jets did without any real high-profile free agents or trades, I would say that's a feather in Arniel's cap. But at the same time, Arniel has been to the Stanley Cup final with the New York Rangers, losing ultimately to the LA Kings, but he coached in a Calder Cup final against the Hershey Bears, so he's got lots of experience, but this is his first Stanley Cup playoff series as the bench boss, so he's obviously eager and excited about that. But I think it'll be really interesting to watch because to me this will remind me of, we've talked about this a lot, the Dallas-St. Louis series from 2019 in the second round, right? That one that went 7 with Maroon scoring the double OT winner. I think there'll be a lot of back and forth. The matchup game will be super interesting to monitor. We know Snuggerud's come in and done a great job since Holloway got injured, but how are the matchups going to go? How is Braden Shen going to match up? How is Robert Thomas going to play? I mean, the other storyline I should have mentioned, like Robert Thomas and Mark Scheifele, both very much auditioning for the Olympics next year, guys, and both have had great years after those Four Nations teams were named. So those guys are obviously going to be under the spotlight, under the microscope, and then Kyrou, right? Kyrou has sort of been reborn and rejuvenated under Jim Montgomery, but he's also got to do it now in the playoffs when the lights are shining the brightest. So I think that'll be fascinating. And then the other thing I'll be watching too, I mean, we know what Radek Faksa brings. He's got lots of experience. Morgan Barron is a guy that the Jets really missed in that playoff series with the Colorado Avalanche. He plays a power forward game, very responsible two-way player, and sort of those complementary pieces that end up scoring big goals. I think Morgan Barron's going to be kind of X factor, maybe too strong, but he's the kind of guy that could have an impact on the series that you're maybe not expecting because he's not a high point guy.
All right, Ken, we'll get you out of here on this. We got about a minute left here before we got to go to break, but What is the level of pressure on the Winnipeg Jets leading into this series? You had a couple of first-round exits over the last 2 seasons. Really good teams end the season early. Going into this one, like if they were to drop game 1, what is the level of panic that will be taking place in Winnipeg surrounding this team?
Yeah, I don't know that I don't sense panic around the group, and I don't think that they're carrying the weight of expectation of years past, similar to the Chicago. This isn't the Chicago Cubs haven't won the World Series since 1908 kind of thing. But at the same time, this core group has had a lot of scar tissue built up over the years. They were talking about the value of that today. But again, I don't think there's a team that's. I'll be shocked if they lose 4 in a row, right? I mean, this is something where the last 2 years they've won game 1. The game 1 in Vegas was very handily, and then they got gentlemen swept by both of those teams. So I don't think that this is a group that's going to be worried if they fall behind. But having said all that, I mean, of course, their expectation is to go on a long playoff run. They talked about the importance of getting better over the course of the summer, not feeling that same empty feeling as they had last spring. But ultimately, now it's perfect place to be playing because it's a show me time for the Winnipeg Jets. They're going to the show me state, and they need to show that they've learned lessons from past heartache. And the Blues are going to do everything in their power to inflict one more of those, right? But I think it's going to be an awesome series. I think it goes 6 or 7, and to me, obviously the Jets are favored, and I will pick them, in 6 or 7. But I do think that the Blues are going to be a very tough out in this playoffs, and that's why I can't wait for the series to get going.
Ken Wiebe is the Jets beat writer for the Winnipeg Free Press. You can find him on the Kenny and Rennie Show as well. You can check that out over on YouTube if you'd like to hear more of the Jets' perspective on this series. Hey, Ken, we appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. Looking forward to seeing you out of the rink next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. My pleasure, and we'll look forward to doing it again before the series is over. Enjoy every minute of it.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Ken Wiebe joining us here on 101 ESPN. Appreciate his time as always. Coming up next, we'll hit the rewind, finish this thing up by continuing to preview the Blues series against the Winnipeg Jets. We'll see game 1 this weekend, and the Cardinals 3 more games before we come back on Monday against the New York Mets. The rewind next here on BK and Ferrario.
Centene Community Ice Center inside the E&B Granite Studios. This is BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. E&B Granite, Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring. Let's run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Hey, if you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find it. That is all sponsored by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app, free to use, easy to download as well. It is sponsored by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. If you go over there, you can check out Alex's latest edition of the Last Minute Blues podcast. You can also find that at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. They previewed this series against the Winnipeg Jets in its entirety. You can also check out the Redbird Report podcast with T-Bone and me. That is available for you today. We recorded that yesterday. It's in a new studio, and it is free, of course, to download. Be sure to subscribe to that over on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Alex, to finish out the show today, I'll start with the Cardinals. Cardinals in New York for 3 games against the Mets. Lost game 1 yesterday, 4-1. Rough day for the offense. Griffin Canning looked awesome against them. You do have a bit of a disadvantage pitching-wise over the next 2 days. You got Michaelis today against their best dude, Peterson. Tomorrow it's Libby against Senga. T-Bone, I think if you get 2 out of 3, you're feeling pretty good about it at this point. Win 2 of the 4 games in New York. What are you anticipating from the Cardinals against the Mets the rest of the way?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the game with Miles Michaelis on the mound. You just hope that he can give you 5 solid innings and you're still in it. Look, I think the offense is going to be fine. I still believe the offense is going to come through and help you win 2 of these games. I think you're right. I think your hope is that you can take 2 of the remaining 3 here. You should earn a split with the New York Mets, in my opinion.
Yeah, they are getting very upset about what they've had so far from Juan Soto.
Yeah, terrible signing. Terrible signing.
That's what happens when you give guys big
Twitter.
deals.
Alex, the Blues are in action this weekend. Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It begins with the Jets versus the Blues tomorrow at 5 o'clock right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Alex will, of course, have pregame coverage for that. We've talked about it all day long, boys. What are you anticipating in game number 1?
I'm anticipating it to be physical. I'm anticipating an overtime game because I think that's going to be how tight this series is going to be. But physicality, low scoring. I think you're going to see both goaltenders have the moments that look big. I do think the Blues come out on top in this one.
Yeah, I'm expecting the same thing. It's going to be physical. I think it's going to be a race to 2. I think it's going to be a very tough game, or tough series in general, of trying to find shots. It's going to be the battle in front of the net, as you mentioned early on, Alex. I think Blues will win game 1 by a final score of 2-1.
3-2.
I think Winnipeg wins game 1 in this series. I do like your bet, though, the one that I feel
what
better
a roller
about.
coaster ride you've been on 48 hours.
Under 5.5 goals overall for this game. I really like that. I would also do a little bit of a parlay here, Alex, if you want to. Jordan Kyrou, Kyle Connor both to score a goal. I like the matchup for Jordan Kyrou in this series. Put a $10 wager on that, win $210 over there on Fanduel.
I'd do a Blues score first.
Ooh, I
think I saw it at plus 750 earlier today. Blues to score first in this one. Which, by the way, a programming note, we're going to go live on YouTube for all of our post-game shows this postseason. So you can interact with us on that one. And I think I'm going to have JR hop on with us from Winnipeg after game 1.
Fantastic. That's all coming to you live on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. And that's where you can watch the Fast Lane. They're coming up next from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Great job back in the studio today by Jordan Deacon. Appreciate her as always. We will talk to you guys on Monday at 11 a.m. Fastlane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.